Welcome, guardian of Gotham's shadows, to a journey through the darkest enigmas that haunt the streets where justice walks a razor's edge between truth and deception. Tonight, we shall explore the complete chronicles of mysteries that have tested the world's greatest detective, from childhood secrets buried in crime alleys' cobblestones to cosmic conspiracies that span generations of darkness. Let the rhythm of Gotham's eternal reign and the whisper of cape against stone carry you into peaceful slumber as we trace every thread of uncertainty that has woven itself into Batman's legend. Close your eyes, seeker of hidden truths, and let these tales of shadow and mystery unfold like pages from a case file written in moonlight and sorrow. In the vast cathedral of mysteries that comprises Gotham City's darkest secrets, there exists one enigma so fundamental, so deeply woven into the fabric of Batman's eternal struggle, that it transcends mere criminal investigation to become something approaching theological inquiry. This is the question that has haunted readers, writers, and the Dark Knight himself for more than 8 decades of publication, a riddle wrapped in madness and tied with the blood-stained ribbon of chaos incarnate. Who is the Joker? What name did he bear before the chemicals bleached his skin to bone white and twisted his mouth into that eternal rictus of malevolent joy? The very asking of this question reveals its profound importance. For in seeking to understand the clown prince of crime's true identity, we confront fundamental questions about the nature of evil itself, and whether some forms of darkness are too pure, too absolute, to have emerged from anything so mundane as human origin. The genius of the Joker, as conceived in his earliest appearances, lay precisely in this absence of conventional backstory, this refusal to provide the comfortable explanations that would have made him comprehensible rather than terrifying. Where other villains possessed motivations that could be understood, even if not condoned, the Joker represented something far more disturbing. The possibility that evil needed no justification, that cruelty could exist for its own sake, that chaos could be embraced not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. His first appearance in Batman #1 established him not as a man who had become a monster, but as a force of nature that wore the shape of a man while remaining fundamentally alien to human understanding. Yet even as DC maintained this deliberate mystery throughout the character's early decades, the human desire for explanation and origin inevitably began to creep into the narrative, creating tension between the Joker's effectiveness as an unknowable force and readers' natural curiosity about his background. The first significant attempt to provide such an explanation came in Detective Comics number 168 in 1951, where the story, The Man Behind the Red Hood, introduced the concept that would eventually become the template for most subsequent origin attempts: the notion that the Joker had once been a criminal known as the Red Hood, whose distinctive headgear had both concealed his identity and contributed to his eventual transformation. This early origin story established patterns that would echo through decades of subsequent retellings, suggesting that the man who became the Joker had been involved in criminal activity before his transformation, that his distinctive appearance was the result of an accident involving industrial chemicals rather than deliberate choice, and most importantly, that his madness and evil were consequences of his physical transformation rather than inherent aspects of his character. The Red Hood identity provided just enough explanation to satisfy curiosity, while maintaining sufficient ambiguity to preserve the character's essential mystery. The definitive exploration of this origin concept came 37 years later with Alan Moore's masterpiece, The Killing Joke, a graphic novel that simultaneously provided the most detailed and psychologically sophisticated Joker origin story ever published, while also calling into question the very possibility of knowing the truth about such a figure. Moore's approach was brilliantly paradoxical, offering readers exactly the kind of tragic backstory they had long desired, while also suggesting that such stories might be nothing more than comforting fictions designed to make the incomprehensible seem manageable. In Moore's telling, the man who would become the Joker was a struggling comedian whose desperation to provide for his pregnant wife led him to accept a job assisting criminals in robbing a chemical plant where he had once worked. The cruel irony of this origin lay in its mundane believability. Here was not a criminal mastermind or megalomaniacal genius, but simply an ordinary man driven by ordinary pressures to make a choice that would destroy everything he valued most. The death of his wife and unborn child before the robbery even took place transformed what should have been a crime committed from love into an act of meaningless desperation. The transformation scene that followed became one of the most iconic moments in Batman mythology, as the failed comedian's plunge into the chemical vat represented not merely physical alteration, but complete psychological dissolution. The man who emerged from those bubbling acids was fundamentally different from the one who had fallen in, not simply because his appearance had been grotesquely altered, but because his entire relationship to meaning and purpose had been chemically dissolved along with his former face. The permanent smile that the chemicals had carved into his features became both symbol and symptom of a mind that had found in madness the only possible response to a universe too cruel and arbitrary to bear. Yet even as Moore crafted this powerfully tragic origin, he embedded within the story itself a crucial disclaimer that has become as famous as any other aspect of the narrative: the Joker's own admission that he prefers his past to be multiple choice. His observation that, "Sometimes I remember it one way, sometimes another," served as both character insight and authorial commentary on the fundamental unknowability of evil. The implication was clear. Even if this version of events was accurate, even if every detail had been perfectly researched and truthfully presented, the essential nature of the Joker would remain as mysterious as ever, because madness, by definition, defies rational explanation. This brilliant narrative strategy allowed Moore to have his cake and eat it too, providing the detailed origin story that readers craved while simultaneously preserving the character's essential mystery through the simple expedient of making the Joker himself an unreliable narrator of his own transformation. The story suggested that the Joker might be lying, might be confused, might be remembering incorrectly, or might be telling the truth about events that were themselves too traumatic and transformative to be accurately recalled or coherently communicated. The multiple-choice approach to the Joker's origin became the dominant paradigm for understanding the character throughout the following decades, allowing different writers to explore various possibilities while never definitively closing the door on alternatives. Some stories suggested he had been a small-time hood. Others portrayed him as a failed entertainer. Still others hinted at more exotic backgrounds, involving industrial accidents, military experiments, or supernatural interventions. Each version contributed something valuable to the overall mythology, while none claimed ultimate authority over the character's true history. The psychological implications of this approach extended far beyond simple narrative convenience, touching on fundamental questions about identity, memory, and the relationship between past and present that resonated with contemporary understanding of trauma and its effects on consciousness. The idea that the Joker might genuinely not know his own origin, that the chemicals and madness might have erased not just his face but his entire sense of continuous self, suggested a form of psychological death and rebirth that was more complete and more terrifying than simple amnesia. This uncertainty about origins also served important thematic purposes within Batman's broader mythology, creating parallels and contrasts with Bruce Wayne's own transformation that highlighted the different ways that trauma could reshape human consciousness. Where Bruce had channeled his childhood trauma into a coherent mission and identity, maintaining clear connections to his past and his values. The Joker represented the possibility of trauma so complete that it severed all connections to previous existence, creating something entirely new and fundamentally disconnected from normal human experience. The question of the Joker's true identity reached a new level of cosmic significance during Geoff Johns' Justice League run, specifically during the Dark Side War storyline that provided Batman with access to the Mobius chair, a piece of New Gods technology capable of answering any question posed to it. The scene in which Batman, seated upon this cosmic throne of knowledge, asks, "What is the Joker's real name?" has become one of the most discussed moments in modern Batman mythology. Not because of what was revealed, but because of what was withheld. The chair's response, whatever it was, clearly shocked Batman to his core, as evidenced by his whispered reaction, "That's impossible." Yet readers were not privy to this cosmic revelation, creating a new category of mystery that transcended the usual limitations of comic book storytelling. Here was information that existed within the fictional universe, that had been received by a character readers trusted, yet remained completely inaccessible to the audience that had followed Batman's adventures for decades. The implications of Batman's shocked reaction have fueled speculation and analysis that continues to this day, with theories ranging from the mundane to the metaphysical. Some have suggested that the Joker's real name might be something that connects him to other established characters in unexpected ways, perhaps revealing family relationships or shared origins that would recontextualize their entire dynamic. Others have proposed that the name itself might be somehow impossible or paradoxical, perhaps indicating that the Joker is not entirely human, or that his existence violates conventional understanding of identity and continuity. The most intriguing possibility is that the Mobius chair's answer challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of identity itself, perhaps revealing that the Joker had no true name because he had transcended normal categories of individual existence, or conversely, that he possessed multiple names, corresponding to multiple simultaneous identities that existed in parallel rather than sequence. The shock value of the revelation seemed to suggest that whatever the answer was, it violated Batman's understanding of reality in ways that mere criminal identity or hidden relationship could not account for. This cosmic mystery was further complicated by the subsequent revelation during the Three Jokers storyline, which suggested that there had been not one but three individuals operating under the Joker identity across the character's publication history. This development, rather than simplifying the identity question, multiplied its complexity by suggesting that the search for the Joker's real name might be fundamentally misconceived, based on the false assumption that there was a single individual whose identity could be discovered and catalogued. The Three Jokers concept, as developed by Geoff Johns in collaboration with artist Jason Fabok, presented the possibility that different eras of Joker stories had featured different individuals, each representing a distinct aspect of the character's evolution and appeal. The criminal represented the original Golden Age Joker, a calculating gangster whose crimes were motivated by profit and power. The clown embodied the Silver Age interpretation, a prankster whose schemes were elaborate jokes designed more to amuse than to harm. The comedian reflected the modern understanding of the character, as established by The Killing Joke and its aftermath, a figure whose humor was inseparable from cruelty and whose jokes always ended in tragedy. This tripartite division served multiple narrative functions simultaneously, providing explanation for the character's apparent inconsistencies across decades of stories, while also deepening the mystery by suggesting that the Joker was not merely unknowable but actually multiple, a hydra-headed manifestation of chaos that could not be reduced to any single identity or origin. The possibility that Batman had been fighting not one enemy but three, perhaps without even realizing it, added layers of complexity to their relationship that extended far beyond simple criminal rivalry. The psychological implications of the Three Jokers concept were particularly fascinating in their suggestion that the Joker might represent not an individual but an archetype, a role that could be filled by different people who shared certain psychological or circumstantial similarities. This interpretation connected to broader themes in Batman mythology about the way that trauma and obsession could create similar responses in different individuals, suggesting that Gotham City itself might be a kind of factory for producing Joker-like figures through its unique combination of corruption, desperation, and chemical hazards. Yet even as the Three Jokers storyline provided new information about the characters' multiplicity, it maintained the essential mystery by refusing to definitively identify any of the three as the real or original Joker. The story suggested that Batman had always known more about the Joker's identity than he had admitted, but chose to keep this knowledge to himself for reasons that were never fully explained. This decision preserved the character's mystery while adding new layers of complexity about Batman's own motivations and methods of dealing with information that might be too dangerous or disturbing to share. The deliberate maintenance of mystery around the Joker's identity reflects broader understanding within the comics industry about the relationship between explanation and terror, knowledge and fear. Many of the most effective horror stories operate on the principle that the unknown is more frightening than the known. That imagination can conjure terrors more disturbing than any explicit description could provide. The Joker's effectiveness as a source of unease and dread has always depended partly on his unknowability, his status as a force that operates outside normal categories of understanding and prediction. This principle extends beyond mere horror storytelling to encompass deeper philosophical questions about the nature of evil and its relationship to human comprehension. The idea that evil can be explained, that it emerges from understandable causes, and can therefore be addressed through appropriate interventions, is comforting because it suggests that the world operates according to rational principles and that problems can be solved through sufficient knowledge and effort. The Joker's mystery challenges this assumption by presenting evil that appears to exist without cause, to operate without purpose, to continue without hope of resolution or cure. The various attempts by writers and editors to explain or contextualize the Joker's mystery have consistently run up against this fundamental tension between the desire for explanation and the recognition that explanation might diminish the character's power and significance. Every origin story, no matter how well crafted or psychologically sophisticated, risks reducing the Joker from cosmic force to comprehensible human being, from avatar of chaos to victim of circumstance whose evil can be understood and therefore, potentially, addressed or cured. The ongoing debate within fan communities about whether the Joker's identity should ever be definitively revealed reflects these deeper concerns about the relationship between mystery and meaning, knowledge and power. Those who argue for maintaining the mystery often do so from the perspective that some questions are more powerful when left unanswered, that the Joker's effectiveness depends on his remaining fundamentally unknowable and unpredictable. Those who advocate for revelation often focus on the potential for deeper character development and more sophisticated storytelling that might emerge from understanding his origins and motivations. The practical considerations faced by comic book publishers in managing the Joker's mystery also reflect broader challenges in maintaining long-running fictional properties across multiple creative teams and changing cultural contexts. The desire to provide new information and fresh interpretations must be balanced against the need to preserve the essential characteristics that have made the character enduringly popular and effective. The solution has generally been to add layers of complexity and ambiguity rather than definitive answers, allowing each creative team to contribute to the mythology while avoiding commitments that might constrain future storytellers. The influence of the Joker's identity mystery extends far beyond comic books to encompass film, television, and other media adaptations that must grapple with the same fundamental questions about explanation versus mystery. Different adaptations have taken various approaches, from Tim Burton's suggestion of specific identity and motivation to Christopher Nolan's emphasis on the Joker as agent of chaos whose origins are deliberately obscured. Each interpretation reflects particular artistic vision and thematic emphasis, while contributing to the ongoing conversation about how much explanation enhances rather than diminishes the character's impact. The enduring fascination with the Joker's identity also reflects deeper human needs to understand and categorize the forces that threaten security and order, to transform the incomprehensible into the manageable through the application of knowledge and analysis. The search for the Joker's real name represents, in metaphorical terms, the broader human struggle to make sense of senseless violence, to find patterns in apparent chaos, to discover meaning in experiences that seem to deny the very possibility of meaning. Yet perhaps the most profound aspect of the Joker's identity mystery is its suggestion that some questions are worth asking not because they can be answered, but because the asking itself reveals important truths about the questioner and the world in which such questions arise. Batman's obsession with understanding his greatest enemy reflects his own psychological needs and methods of processing trauma and threat, while readers' fascination with the mystery reflects broader cultural anxieties about the nature of evil and the possibility of understanding or controlling the forces that disrupt civilized existence. The question of who the Joker really is may ultimately be less important than the question of why we need to know, why the mystery has proven so enduringly compelling across generations of readers and decades of stories. In this sense, the Joker's identity becomes a mirror in which we see reflected our own relationships to uncertainty, chaos, and the limits of human knowledge and control. The man behind the makeup may remain forever unknown, but the search for him reveals everything we need to know about ourselves and the darkness we fear both within and without. In the labyrinthine depths of Gotham City's most enduring mysteries, there exists one question that has haunted the streets of Crime Alley for generations, casting shadows that stretch far beyond that narrow passage where tragedy first transformed a young boy into the Dark Knight. This is not merely a question of criminal identification or forensic investigation, but rather a fundamental inquiry into the very nature of Batman's existence and the forces that shaped his mission. Was the murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne truly the random act of street violence it has so often been portrayed as, or does it represent something far more sinister, the opening gambit in a conspiracy so vast and deeply rooted in Gotham's corrupt soil that it has influenced every aspect of the city's development across multiple generations? The answer to this question, if it exists at all, would redefine not only Bruce Wayne's understanding of his own origin, but the entire framework through which we comprehend Gotham's endless cycle of corruption and violence. The traditional narrative of that fateful night in Crime Alley has achieved the status of modern mythology, repeated so often and in so many variations that it has taken on the weight of established fact, despite the troubling inconsistencies that have accumulated around its edges, like shadows gathering at dusk. According to the most commonly accepted version of events, Thomas and Martha Wayne were returning from an evening at the theatre with their 8-year-old son Bruce when they encountered a desperate criminal in the narrow confines of Crime Alley. This nameless figure, later identified in most continuities as Joe Chill, demanded the couple's valuables at gunpoint before shooting them both dead in front of their terrified child. The simplicity of this account has always been both its strength and its weakness, providing clear cause and effect that explains Bruce's transformation into Batman, while also raising questions that become more troubling the more carefully they are examined. Why would one of Gotham's wealthiest couples choose to walk through one of the city's most dangerous neighborhoods rather than summoning their chauffeur or taking a taxi? How did a random mugger happen to encounter them in such a secluded location? What confluence of circumstances led Thomas Wayne, a man known for his compassion and social conscience, to make the series of decisions that placed his family in such vulnerable circumstances? The figure of Joe Chill himself has undergone numerous transformations across the decades of Batman's publication history, each iteration adding new layers of complexity to what should have been a straightforward case of street crime. In some versions, he is portrayed as a desperate man, driven to violence by economic circumstances and social inequality, a victim of the same systemic failures that Batman would later dedicate his life to addressing. Other interpretations present him as a career criminal with connections to Gotham's organized crime families, suggesting that the Wayne murders were not random violence, but targeted assassination disguised as robbery gone wrong. The most significant evolution in Chill's characterization came with the introduction of the possibility that he had been hired to eliminate Thomas Wayne specifically, transforming the encounter from chance meeting to premeditated murder. This interpretation fundamentally altered the psychological landscape of Batman's origin, changing Bruce's mission from a war against random violence to a quest for justice against specific enemies who had deliberately destroyed his family. The implications of this shift extended far beyond simple plot mechanics to encompass questions about destiny, purpose, and the difference between responding to chaos and seeking retribution against identifiable opponents. The various conspiracy theories surrounding the Wayne murders have drawn connections to nearly every aspect of Gotham's political and criminal landscape, suggesting that Thomas Wayne's death served multiple purposes for various shadowy organizations and corrupt officials. His work as a physician and philanthropist had brought him into contact with Gotham's most desperate populations, providing him with first-hand knowledge of the systemic failures and institutional corruption that kept the city's underclass trapped in cycles of poverty and violence. His wealth and social position gave him the resources and influence necessary to effect meaningful change, making him a potential threat to those who profited from maintaining the status quo. The political dimensions of potential conspiracy become particularly compelling when examined through the lens of Thomas Wayne's documented involvement in urban renewal projects and social reform initiatives that would have threatened established power structures throughout Gotham. His plans for revitalizing the city's most neglected neighborhoods, improving access to healthcare and education, and creating economic opportunities for disadvantaged populations represented exactly the kind of systematic change that corrupt politicians and criminal organizations would have every reason to prevent. The elimination of such a reformer, disguised as random street crime, would serve the dual purpose of removing a threat while discouraging others from following his example. The Wayne family's connection to Gotham's oldest and most secretive power structures adds another layer of complexity to the conspiracy theories that have emerged around their murders. The revelation of the Court of Owls and their centuries-long manipulation of Gotham's development suggests that the Wayne deaths may have been orchestrated by forces far older and more deeply entrenched than any conventional criminal organization or political faction. The court's method of eliminating threats through their undead assassins, the Talons, demonstrates their willingness to use violence to maintain their hidden control over the city's destiny. The timing of Thomas and Martha Wayne's deaths, occurring just as Bruce was approaching an age where he might begin to understand and potentially inherit his father's reformist agenda, suggests a level of strategic thinking that transcends simple, opportunistic crime. A random mugger would have had no reason to consider the long-term implications of killing the Wayne parents while leaving their son alive. Yet from a conspiratorial perspective, eliminating the parents while the child was still young enough to be shaped by trauma rather than inspired by their example represents precisely the kind of calculated cruelty that secret societies excel at implementing. The Court of Owl's particular interest in the Wayne family line, as revealed through their attempts to recruit Bruce and their connections to other family members across generations, indicates that their relationship to the Waynes extends far beyond simple political opposition to encompass deeper questions about bloodline, inheritance, and the role that certain families are meant to play in Gotham's hidden history. The possibility that Thomas and Martha Wayne were killed not for what they had done but for what their son might become adds a prophetic dimension to the conspiracy that transforms it from mere political assassination into something big, approaching mythological destiny. The involvement of Gotham's medical establishment in potential conspiracy theories surrounding the Wayne murders has received less attention than political or criminal connections, yet represents equally troubling possibilities for those willing to examine the evidence with sufficient skepticism. Thomas Wayne's position as one of the city's most prominent physicians would have provided him with access to information about public health crises, environmental hazards, and institutional medical malpractice that could have threatened powerful interests throughout Gotham's corporate and political hierarchies. The cover-up of environmental contamination, the suppression of research into industrial diseases, and the manipulation of medical records to protect corporate interests from liability all represent areas where Thomas Wayne's professional integrity and social conscience might have brought him into conflict with forces capable of arranging his elimination. The medical community's subsequent silence about potential conspiracy theories, their willingness to accept the official narrative without demanding more thorough investigation, and their failure to pursue justice for one of their most respected colleagues all suggest either complicity or intimidation that extends throughout Gotham's healthcare system. The Wayne Foundation's extensive charitable activities and their focus on addressing the root causes of urban decay and social dysfunction created additional opportunities for Thomas Wayne to uncover information that powerful interests would prefer to keep hidden. His funding of research into juvenile delinquency, urban planning failures, and the relationship between environmental factors and criminal behavior would have brought him into contact with data that could expose the deliberate policies and systematic neglect that maintained Gotham's status as a breeding ground for corruption and violence. The possibility that the Wayne murders were orchestrated to prevent the release of such information, or to ensure that Wayne Foundation resources would be redirected away from potentially threatening research, represents a form of conspiracy that operates through the manipulation of philanthropy and social reform, rather than crude political assassination. The murder of idealistic reformers disguised as street crime serves to discourage others from pursuing similar activities, while also ensuring that their research dies with them, creating a chilling effect that extends far beyond the immediate victims. The role of law enforcement in either facilitating or covering up a conspiracy surrounding the Wayne murders represents perhaps the most troubling aspect of the various theories that have emerged around their deaths. The Gotham City Police Department's handling of the case, their apparent lack of interest in pursuing leads that might connect the murders to larger criminal organizations, and their willingness to accept the simple explanation of random street crime, all suggest either incompetence so profound as to constitute criminal negligence, or active participation in a cover-up designed to protect the real perpetrators. The subsequent career trajectories of the police officers who investigated the Wayne murders, their tendency to avoid discussing the case in later years, and the suspicious deaths or disappearances of those who showed too much interest in pursuing alternative theories all point toward systematic suppression of information that extends throughout Gotham's law enforcement hierarchy. The fact that Joe Chill, when he has appeared in various continuities, has often been eliminated by unknown assailants before he could provide detailed testimony about his motivations or possible accomplices suggests that someone with considerable resources and influence has been working to ensure that certain questions about the Wayne murders never receive satisfactory answers. The pattern of evidence, suppression, witness intimidation, and selective investigation that characterizes official responses to Wayne murder conspiracy theories mirrors the methods that Gotham's corrupt institutions have employed to protect other criminal enterprises and cover up inconvenient truths. The same networks of compromised officials, intimidated witnesses, and destroyed evidence that enable the city's ongoing cycles of corruption and violence appear to have been deployed to ensure that the truth about Thomas and Martha Wayne's deaths remains forever hidden beneath layers of misdirection and deliberate obfuscation. The psychological impact of conspiracy theories surrounding his parents' deaths on Bruce Wayne himself represents a crucial dimension of this mystery that extends far beyond questions of historical fact to encompass the very foundations of Batman's mission and methods. The difference between responding to random violence and pursuing specific enemies who murdered his family for calculated reasons fundamentally alters the nature of his crusade and the psychological mechanisms that sustain his extraordinary dedication to fighting crime in Gotham City. If Thomas and Martha Wayne were victims of random street crime, then Bruce's transformation into Batman represents a response to chaos, an attempt to impose order and justice on a world that appears fundamentally random and meaningless. His war against crime becomes a kind of rage against entropy, a refusal to accept that good people can be destroyed by forces beyond their control or comprehension. This interpretation emphasizes Batman's role as protector of innocence and guardian against the kind of senseless violence that claimed his own parents. However, if the Wayne murders were orchestrated by identifiable enemies as part of a larger conspiracy to maintain Gotham's corrupt status quo, then Batman's mission transforms from general crime, fighting into a specific quest for justice against those responsible for destroying his family. This interpretation suggests that beneath all of Batman's various activities and campaigns lies a deeper purpose: the identification and elimination of the conspiracy that killed his parents and continues to corrupt the city they died trying to heal. The evidence that has accumulated around various conspiracy theories is sufficiently compelling to support either interpretation, yet never definitive enough to settle the question permanently. Hospital records that might confirm Thomas Wayne's discovery of dangerous information have been lost or destroyed. Police files from the original investigation contain suspicious gaps and inconsistencies. Witnesses who might have provided crucial testimony have died under mysterious circumstances or disappeared entirely. The paper trail that might connect the Wayne murders to larger conspiracies has been systematically erased or rendered impossible to follow. This pattern of missing evidence creates a kind of negative proof that conspiracy theorists argue is itself evidence of cover-up, while skeptics point to it as confirmation that no conspiracy existed to be covered up in the first place. The absence of definitive proof becomes simultaneously argument for and against the various theories that have emerged around the Wayne murders, creating a recursive loop of suspicion and doubt that can neither be confirmed nor definitively refuted. The various continuity reboots and timeline alterations that have characterized Batman's publication history have further complicated attempts to establish definitive facts about the Wayne murders, with different versions of events coexisting in parallel realities that may or may not reflect the truth about any particular interpretation. The Earth One continuity's suggestion of political conspiracy, the New 52's hints about Court of Owl's involvement, and the various animated and film adaptations' different approaches to the question all contribute to a multimedia mythology that contains multiple, incompatible versions of the truth. This multiplicity of narratives serves to highlight the fundamental uncertainty that surrounds the Wayne murders, while also suggesting that the question of what really happened may be less important than the question of how different possibilities shape Bruce Wayne's understanding of his mission and his relationship to Gotham City. Each version of the conspiracy theory emphasizes different aspects of Batman's character and methodology, revealing how origin stories function not merely as historical accounts but as psychological foundations that support different interpretations of heroic purpose and moral obligation. The ongoing nature of these mysteries ensures that they remain active forces in Batman's world rather than historical curiosities that can be filed away and forgotten. The possibility that the conspiracy responsible for his parents' deaths continues to operate, that the forces that destroyed his family remain active threats to Gotham's future, provides ongoing motivation for Batman's crusade, while also ensuring that his personal quest for justice can never be definitively completed or abandoned. The question of whether the Wayne murders represent random crime or calculated conspiracy ultimately transcends simple historical inquiry to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of evil, the possibility of justice, and the relationship between individual trauma and systemic corruption. The mystery endures not because evidence is insufficient to resolve it, but because the question itself reveals truths about Batman's world that are more important than any specific answer could provide. In the shadows of Crime Alley, where it all began, the truth waits patiently for a detective skilled enough to find it, while the city it might explain continues its eternal dance between darkness and light. In the darkest recesses of Gotham City's hidden history, where ancient stones hold secrets that predate the founding of the nation itself, there exists a conspiracy so vast and so deeply rooted in the very foundations of the city's existence that it makes all other criminal enterprises seem like children's games played in the shadow of titans. This is the realm of the Court of Owls, that secret society of Gotham's elite whose influence has shaped every significant event in the city's development for more than 2 centuries, whose agents move unseen through the highest levels of government, business, and society, and whose very existence represents a form of institutional evil so pervasive that it has become indistinguishable from the natural order of things. Yet within this labyrinth of conspiracy and control, there exists one mystery that stands apart from all others in its personal significance for Batman, one question that strikes at the very heart of his identity and challenges his understanding of family, brotherhood, and the fundamental nature of his own existence. The figure who calls himself Lincoln March emerged into Bruce Wayne's awareness not as an obvious enemy but as an apparent ally, a charismatic politician whose vision for Gotham's future seemed to align perfectly with the philanthropic goals that the Wayne Foundation had long pursued through more traditional channels. March possessed the kind of compelling public persona that could inspire genuine hope among citizens who had grown cynical about the possibility of meaningful change in their corrupt city, combining idealistic rhetoric with practical policy proposals that suggested he might actually be capable of delivering on his promises of reform and renewal. His background appeared impeccable under casual scrutiny, with all the proper credentials and connections that would be expected of someone seeking high office in a major American city. Yet there existed subtle inconsistencies and curious gaps in his personal history that would have troubled a more careful observer. Documents that should have been easily accessible were missing from public records. Childhood friends and family members were mysteriously unavailable for comment, and the various charitable and business organizations with which he claimed affiliation seemed to have remarkably little detailed information about his actual involvement in their activities. The relationship that developed between Bruce Wayne and Lincoln March was characterized by the kind of easy camaraderie that emerges between individuals who appear to share fundamental values and common goals. Yet beneath the surface of their professional collaboration lay currents of manipulation and deception that neither participant fully understood at the time. March displayed an uncanny ability to anticipate Bruce's concerns and preferences, to propose solutions that seemed perfectly tailored to address the Wayne Foundation's priorities, and to navigate the complex social and political dynamics of Gotham's elite circles with the confidence of someone who had been born into that rarefied atmosphere. The psychological profile that March presented to the world was that of a reformer driven by genuine compassion for Gotham's suffering population. Yet there were moments when his mask slipped sufficiently to reveal glimpses of something far darker and more complex underneath. His knowledge of Gotham's hidden history was encyclopedic in scope, extending far beyond what any ordinary politician would have needed to know about the city's past. While his insights into the psychological motivations of various power brokers suggested either extensive research or intimate personal familiarity with their secrets and vulnerabilities, the revelation of March's true identity came not through detective work or investigation, but through the dramatic unmasking that followed his emergence as one of the Court of Owl's most dangerous agents, a moment that transformed what had seemed like political alliance into something far more personal and devastating. The claim that he made in that crucial confrontation struck at Bruce Wayne's most fundamental assumptions about his own identity and family history. Lincoln March was not merely another enemy, but Thomas Wayne Jr., Bruce's own brother, who had been hidden away after a childhood accident and raised in secret by the court to serve as their ultimate weapon against the Wayne family legacy. The evidence that March presented to support this extraordinary claim was both compelling and deeply disturbing, consisting of hospital records that documented the birth and early childhood of a second Wayne son, legal documents that had been sealed and hidden away in archives that few people even knew existed, and photographic evidence that seemed to confirm the existence of a brother whose memory had been deliberately erased from Bruce's consciousness and from all official family histories. The medical records were particularly troubling, describing a young child who had suffered severe injuries in what was described as an accident, but whose treatment had been handled with unusual secrecy and whose recovery had taken place away from the family home. The psychological implications of these revelations were staggering in their scope and complexity, forcing Bruce to confront the possibility that his entire understanding of his family and his own identity had been built upon a foundation of lies and deliberate deception. If March's claims were true, then Bruce had not been an only child, but rather the surviving son of parents who had chosen to abandon one of their children, rather than deal with the complications and difficulties that his injuries had created. The Wayne family legacy of compassion and social responsibility, which had served as the moral foundation for Batman's mission, was revealed to be tainted by an act of callous abandonment that violated every principle that Thomas and Martha Wayne had publicly claimed to uphold. The Court of Owl's role in Thomas Wayne Jr.'s alleged transformation from abandoned child to deadly assassin represented perhaps the most sophisticated and cruel form of psychological warfare ever deployed against Batman, combining elements of family tragedy, institutional conspiracy, and personal betrayal in ways that attacked not only his effectiveness as a crime fighter, but his fundamental sense of self-worth and moral authority. The suggestion that his parents had been capable of such cruelty, that his privileged childhood had been purchased at the cost of his brother's suffering, and that his entire crusade for justice was built upon foundations of family hypocrisy, created forms of guilt and self-doubt that no amount of detective work or crime fighting could adequately address. The methods that the court had allegedly employed to transform the injured child into their weapon were described in terms that combined the precision of modern psychology with the ritualistic elements that characterized all of their basic operations, creating a process that was simultaneously scientific and occult in its approach to reshaping human consciousness and moral orientation. The young Thomas Wayne Jr. had been subjected to years of careful conditioning designed to erase his attachment to his birth family, while channeling his natural intelligence and leadership abilities into service of the court's hidden agenda. The training that March claimed to have received was comprehensive in scope and brutal in implementation, combining physical conditioning with psychological manipulation, academic education with practical instruction in assassination and espionage, legitimate business skills with expertise in corruption and conspiracy. The goal was not simply to create another Talon, but to produce an agent who could operate at the highest levels of Gotham society, who could infiltrate and manipulate the very institutions and individuals that the court needed to control in order to maintain their hidden dominance over the city's development. The philosophical dimensions of March's transformation, from Wayne family member to Court of Owls operative, reflected broader themes about nature versus nurture, the malleability of human consciousness, and the ways in which childhood trauma could be weaponized by sophisticated enemies to create tools of destruction rather than sources of strength. The contrast between Bruce's response to family tragedy and his alleged brother's very different path suggested that even individuals who shared genetic heritage and similar formative experiences could be shaped into fundamentally opposite moral orientations through the application of different environmental influences and training methodologies. The question of whether Lincoln March's claims about his identity were true became secondary to the more important question of how these claims functioned as psychological warfare against Batman's mission and effectiveness. Regardless of the factual accuracy of his assertions about being Thomas Wayne Jr., the very possibility that such a relationship might exist created forms of doubt and self-recrimination that undermined Bruce's confidence in his own judgment and moral authority. The suggestion that he might be fighting his own brother, that his parents might have been capable of abandoning a child, that his privileged upbringing might have been built upon foundations of family cruelty, all served to weaken his psychological defenses against the court's broader campaign to destroy his effectiveness as their primary opponent. The evidence that supported March's claims was frustratingly ambiguous, neither clearly fabricated nor obviously authentic, creating exactly the kind of uncertainty that would be most psychologically damaging to someone of Bruce Wayne's analytical and obsessive personality. Hospital records could be forged, but would require extensive knowledge of medical procedures and institutional practices from decades earlier. Legal documents could be manufactured, but would need to be integrated into existing archives in ways that would fool expert examination. Photographic evidence could be manipulated, but would require sophisticated technical capabilities and detailed knowledge of Wayne family history. The Court of Owls demonstrated expertise in historical manipulation and institutional infiltration, meant that they possessed both the resources and the knowledge necessary to create convincing false evidence, yet the same capabilities would also have enabled them to conceal and preserve genuine evidence if March's claims were actually true. The circular nature of this reasoning meant that neither verification nor debunking of his assertions would definitively resolve the question of their accuracy, creating exactly the kind of perpetual uncertainty that would be most useful for ongoing psychological manipulation. The personal dynamics between Bruce Wayne and Lincoln March were further complicated by the obvious similarities in their capabilities, methods, and psychological profiles that existed regardless of whether they were actually related. Both possessed the kind of brilliant strategic intelligence that enabled them to see patterns and connections that escaped ordinary observation. Both demonstrated the ruthless determination necessary to pursue long-term goals despite significant obstacles and opposition, and both showed the capacity for compartmentalization and deception that was essential for operating effectively in Gotham's corrupt political environment. These similarities could be explained either as evidence of shared genetics and family heritage, or as the result of similar training and conditioning by organizations that understood how to identify and develop particular types of psychological profiles for their own purposes. The Court of Owl's recruitment and training methods were specifically designed to produce agents who could match or exceed the capabilities of their targets, making it impossible to determine whether March's resemblance to Bruce Wayne reflected blood relationship or simply sophisticated preparation for his assigned role as Batman's nemesis. The broader implications of the Lincoln March mystery extended far beyond questions of family relationships to encompass the fundamental nature of identity and the extent to which individual consciousness could be shaped and manipulated by external forces. If March was indeed Thomas Wayne Jr., then his transformation from potential ally into deadly enemy demonstrated the court's ability to corrupt even the most promising human material through the application of sufficient pressure and manipulation over extended periods of time. If he was not actually Bruce's brother, then his successful impersonation of such a relationship revealed equally disturbing truths about the malleability of identity and the ease with which false memories and manufactured evidence could be used to destabilize even the most carefully constructed psychological defenses. The ongoing ambiguity surrounding March's true identity served the court's purposes perfectly by creating a permanent source of doubt and self-recrimination that could be activated whenever Batman's effectiveness against their operations became too threatening. The mere possibility that he might be fighting his own brother, regardless of whether such a relationship actually existed, introduced elements of hesitation and moral complexity into confrontations that might otherwise have been resolved through the application of superior detective skills and fighting abilities. The court's patience in developing and deploying this particular weapon against Batman reflected their understanding of psychological warfare and their recognition that the most effective attacks were often those that operated over dominant evaluation, extended periods of time, rather than seeking immediate, dramatic results. The years of careful preparation that went into establishing March's political career and public persona, the gradual development of his relationship with Bruce Wayne, and the precise timing of his eventual revelation as an enemy, all demonstrated the kind of long-term strategic thinking that characterized the court's approach to maintaining their hidden control over Gotham's development. The various encounters between Batman and Lincoln March revealed the psychological toll that this particular mystery took on Bruce Wayne's effectiveness as a crime fighter and his stability as an individual. The possibility of fighting his own brother created forms of moral paralysis and strategic confusion that his enemies could exploit, while the uncertainty about his family's true history undermined his confidence in the moral foundations that supported his entire crusade for justice in Gotham City. The resolution of the Lincoln March mystery, or rather the deliberate lack of resolution, exemplified the Court of Owl's sophisticated understanding of psychological manipulation and their recognition that some weapons became more effective the longer they remained unused. By never definitively proving or disproving March's claims about his identity, they ensured that this particular source of doubt and confusion would remain available for future deployment whenever Batman's activities threatened their interests too directly. In the final analysis, the question of whether Lincoln March was truly Thomas Wayne Jr. became less important than the question of how this possibility functioned within the broader psychological warfare that the Court of Owls had been conducting against the Wayne family for generations. The mystery served its intended purpose, regardless of its factual basis, creating exactly the kind of doubt and moral complexity that could weaken Batman's resolve while providing his enemies with insights into his psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future confrontations. The shadows cast by this family secret continue to darken the streets of Gotham, reminding all who walk them that even the most fundamental truths about identity and heritage may be nothing more than carefully constructed lies, designed to serve the interests of those who prefer to remain forever hidden in darkness. In the intricate web of vengeance that has ensnared Batman throughout his long crusade against Gotham's darkness, few threads run as deeply personal or as surgically precise as those woven by the figure who emerged from the shadows in 2002, wrapped in bandages like some ancient mummy yet possessed of a modern sophistication that made him uniquely dangerous among the rogues who had challenged the Dark Knight. This was Hush, a name that carried with it implications of silence and secrecy, of whispered conspiracies and muffled screams. Yet the man behind the bandages bore a connection to Bruce Wayne that predated the cape and cowl by decades, reaching back to the innocent days of childhood when the future Batman played in the gardens of Wayne Manor with a boy who would grow up to become one of his most calculating and personally devastating enemies. The complexity of Thomas Elliott's transformation from childhood companion to bandaged adversary lay not in any sudden revelation of evil or dramatic moment of betrayal, but rather in the slow accumulation of resentments and jealousies that had festered beneath the surface of their friendship for years before finally metastasizing into something so twisted and malevolent that it could only be satisfied through the complete destruction of everything Bruce Wayne held dear. The seeds of this hatred were planted not in adulthood, but in the earliest days of their acquaintance, when two privileged children from Gotham's elite families discovered that wealth and status could not protect them from the fundamental differences in character and moral orientation that would ultimately drive them to opposite sides of an eternal conflict. Thomas Elliot possessed from earliest childhood the kind of brilliant analytical mind that should have made him a natural ally for someone like Bruce Wayne. Yet the uses to which he chose to put his exceptional intelligence revealed character flaws so profound and disturbing that they transformed intellectual gifts into instruments of cruelty and manipulation. Where Bruce's traumatic experiences had taught him the value of compassion and the importance of protecting those weaker than himself, Tommy's privileged upbringing had fostered a different set of values entirely, ones that prioritized personal advancement over moral consideration and viewed other people as obstacles to be removed or tools to be manipulated, rather than individuals deserving of respect and protection. The most chilling aspect of Tommy Elliott's psychological profile was revealed through his attitude toward his own parents, those individuals who should have been the primary objects of his love and loyalty, but who instead became targets of his carefully concealed hatred and the subjects of his first serious attempts at murder. Unlike Bruce Wayne, who had lost his parents to random violence and spent his entire adult life fighting to prevent others from suffering similar tragedies, Tommy actively plotted the deaths of Thomas and Martha Elliott, viewing them not as beloved family members but as inconvenient obstacles standing between him and his inheritance. The childhood incident that first revealed the true depths of Tommy's moral corruption involved an elaborate scheme to arrange his parents' deaths in what would appear to be an automobile accident, a plan that demonstrated both his precocious understanding of mechanical systems and his complete lack of normal human empathy or filial affection. The failure of this early murder attempt, prevented only by the skilled medical intervention of Thomas Wayne, who saved the elder Elliot's life, created in Tommy a resentment that encompassed not only his own parents for surviving his attack, but also the Wayne family for interfering with his plans. The psychological dynamics that emerged from this formative experience established patterns that would define Tommy's relationship with Bruce for the remainder of their lives, creating a twisted mirror image of normal childhood friendship in which every act of kindness or generosity on Bruce's part was perceived as an insult or humiliation by his increasingly disturbed companion. Where normal children might have been grateful for a friend's family's intervention in saving their parent's life, Tommy experienced it as a violation of his autonomy and a frustrating reminder of his own limitations and failures. The contrast between Bruce's tragic loss of his parents and Tommy's frustrated desire to murder his own created a psychological divide between the two boys that would only widen with time, as Bruce's trauma drove him toward greater compassion and dedication to protecting others, while Tommy's disappointment pushed him deeper into narcissistic rage and elaborate fantasies of revenge. The irony that Bruce mourned the very thing that Tommy desperately wanted to achieve was not lost on either of them, yet they processed this fundamental difference in completely opposite ways. As the years passed and both boys grew into young men, Tommy's resentment continued to fester and evolve, finding new targets and justifications while maintaining its essential character as a profound rejection of everything that Bruce Wayne represented. The Wayne family's wealth, which had been earned through generations of business success and had been consistently employed in service of charitable causes and social reform, stood in stark contrast to Tommy's inheritance-focused approach to family resources. Yet rather than inspiring him to similar generosity, Bruce's philanthropy only served to highlight Tommy's own selfishness and moral bankruptcy. The development of Tommy Elliott's medical career provided him with both the skills and the credibility necessary to pursue his long-term plans for revenge against Bruce Wayne. Yet even his choice of profession was corrupted by his fundamental character flaws and his inability to view other people as anything more than objects to be manipulated or destroyed. While many physicians are drawn to medicine by genuine desire to heal and help others, Tommy's motivation was entirely different, focused on the power that medical knowledge gave him over life and death, and the opportunities it provided for inflicting suffering while maintaining a respectable public facade. His surgical training was pursued with the same cold precision that characterized all of his activities, yet the skills he developed were employed not in service of healing, but as tools for more sophisticated forms of violence and control. The scalpel became both literal and metaphorical weapon in his hands, capable of inflicting precise damage while leaving minimal evidence of deliberate intent. His understanding of human anatomy and physiology provided him with knowledge of exactly how to cause maximum pain and psychological trauma while maintaining plausible deniability about his intentions and methods. The adoption of the Hush identity represented not merely a practical necessity for concealing Tommy's involvement in criminal activities, but also a psychological statement about his fundamental approach to existence and his relationship with truth and deception. The bandages that covered his face served multiple purposes beyond simple disguise, functioning as symbols of his self-perceived victimhood and his belief that he had been wounded by Bruce Wayne's very existence, that his childhood friend's success and happiness had somehow damaged him in ways that required concealment and protection. The elaborate nature of the Hush conspiracy, with its multiple moving parts and carefully coordinated attacks on every aspect of Bruce Wayne's life, demonstrated both Tommy's intellectual capabilities and his deep understanding of his target's psychological vulnerabilities and emotional attachments. The plan required not only extensive knowledge of Batman's methods and capabilities, but also intimate familiarity with Bruce Wayne's personal relationships and the various pressure points that could be used to destabilize his effectiveness as both hero and individual. The recruitment and manipulation of other villains to serve Hush's agenda revealed his sophisticated understanding of Gotham's criminal ecosystem and his ability to exploit the various rivalries and obsessions that drove Batman's other enemies. Poison Ivy's plant-based powers, Scarecrow's fear toxins, and even the controlled use of Superman through mind manipulation all served specific functions within Tommy's overarching plan. Yet each element was carefully chosen and deployed in ways that reflected his surgical precision and his intimate knowledge of how Bruce Wayne would respond to different types of threats. The psychological warfare that Hush employed against Batman went far beyond physical confrontation or criminal schemes to encompass attacks on Bruce's sense of identity and his understanding of his own past, present, and future. The revelation that his childhood friend had become his enemy forced Bruce to re-examine not only their shared history, but also his own judgment and his ability to recognize evil when it wore familiar faces. The discovery that someone he had trusted and cared for had been plotting against him for decades created forms of self-doubt and paranoia that no amount of detective work or crime-fighting experience could adequately address. The manipulation of Bruce's romantic relationships, particularly his connection to Selina Kyle, demonstrated Tommy's understanding that emotional attachments could be weaponized more effectively than any physical threat or criminal scheme. By targeting not just Bruce's effectiveness as Batman, but also his capacity for personal happiness and meaningful relationships, Hush attacked the very foundations of his psychological stability and his reasons for continuing his crusade against Gotham's criminal element. The role of the Riddler in orchestrating elements of the Hush conspiracy added layers of complexity that transformed what might have been a straightforward revenge plot into something far more sophisticated and multi-layered. Edward Nygma's involvement raised questions about who was really in control of the various schemes and manipulations that comprised the Hush storyline, suggesting that Tommy Elliot might himself have been manipulated by forces that he did not fully understand or control. The possibility that the Riddler had been pulling strings from behind the scenes, using both Hush and Batman as pawns in some larger game of intellectual superiority and criminal achievement, introduced elements of uncertainty that prevented easy resolution of the various mysteries and conflicts that the storyline had created. The question of whether Tommy was the true architect of his own revenge scheme or merely another victim of the Riddler's manipulative genius became central to understanding the nature of his threat and the appropriate response to his activities. The deliberate ambiguity that DC Comics maintained around these questions reflected sophisticated understanding of how mystery and uncertainty could enhance rather than diminish the impact of a villain and his schemes. By refusing to provide definitive answers about who was really in control of the Hush conspiracy, the publishers ensured that readers would continue to debate and analyze the various possibilities long after the immediate storyline had concluded. The surgical precision that Tommy brought to his role as Hush extended beyond his medical training to encompass every aspect of his approach to crime and revenge. From the careful selection of targets to the methodical execution of plans designed to cause maximum psychological damage with minimal risk of detection or capture, his understanding of Bruce Wayne's psychology allowed him to predict responses and prepare countermeasures that turned Batman's own strengths and capabilities against him, creating situations where heroic instincts became liabilities and moral principles became weaknesses to be exploited. The transformation of Tommy Elliot from frustrated child into calculating adult criminal represented a cautionary tale about how childhood trauma and disappointment could be channeled into destructive purposes when not addressed through healthy outlets and supportive relationships. His inability to process his feelings of inadequacy and jealousy in constructive ways led to the development of elaborate revenge fantasies that eventually consumed his entire existence and transformed him into something barely recognizable as human. The ongoing nature of the Hush threat with Tommy's tendency to disappear and reappear at strategic moments throughout Batman's career, ensured that this particular enemy would remain a constant source of uncertainty and potential danger. Unlike villains whose schemes could be defeated and whose threats could be neutralized through conventional law enforcement methods, Hush represented a form of psychological warfare that could never be completely resolved as long as both he and Bruce Wayne continued to exist in the same world. The personal nature of Tommy's hatred for Bruce meant that his criminal activities would always be focused on causing maximum personal damage rather than achieving conventional criminal goals like wealth or power. This made him uniquely dangerous, because his success could not be measured in terms of robberies completed or territories controlled, but only in terms of psychological harm inflicted on his primary target. The surgical precision with which he pursued these goals made him one of the most formidable and persistent enemies that Batman had ever faced. The legacy of the Hush conspiracy extended far beyond its immediate impact on Bruce Wayne to encompass broader questions about trust, friendship, and the ways in which childhood experiences could shape adult behavior in unexpected and dangerous directions. The revelation that someone who had been trusted and cared for could harbor such deep hatred and resentment served as a reminder that evil often wore familiar faces, and that the greatest threats sometimes came from those who were closest to their intended victims. In the end, the mystery of Hush lay not in his identity, which was eventually revealed, but in the depth and persistence of his hatred and the surgical precision with which he had dedicated his entire life to the destruction of someone who had once considered him a friend. The bandages that concealed his face became symbols of the psychological wounds that had never healed, and the moral corruption that had transformed a potentially valuable member of society into one of its most dangerous threats. In the haunting chronicles of Gotham City's most perplexing mysteries, there exists a tale that epitomizes the very essence of the city's corrupting influence, a story that demonstrates how even the pursuit of justice can become entangled in webs of deception so complex that truth itself becomes indistinguishable from carefully constructed lies. This is the saga of the Holiday Killer, a murderer who stalked Gotham's streets during the city's most vulnerable period of transition, striking only on significant calendar dates and leaving behind a trail of bodies that would forever alter the balance of power between law enforcement, organized crime, and the masked vigilante who had only recently begun his war against the darkness that consumed his city from within. The long Halloween murders began during a time when Gotham stood at the precipice of fundamental change, teetering between the old order of organized crime that had controlled the city's underworld for generations, and the new chaos that Batman's presence had introduced into the careful balance of corruption and complicity that had previously maintained a kind of twisted stability. The Falcone crime family, under the leadership of Carmine the Roman Falcone, had for decades operated as the primary power broker in Gotham's criminal ecosystem, maintaining relationships with politicians, police officials, and business leaders that allowed them to function almost as a shadow government, parallel to the city's official institutions. The emergence of costumed criminals like the Joker and Two-Face had already begun to disrupt these traditional power structures, introducing elements of chaos and unpredictability that made the old methods of control and negotiation increasingly ineffective. Batman's crusade against all forms of criminal activity threatened not only individual operations but the entire system of organized corruption that had allowed Gotham's elite to profit from the city's suffering while maintaining plausible deniability about their involvement in illegal activities. Into this volatile situation came the Holiday Killer, a figure whose methodology was as precise as it was mysterious, targeting members of the Falcone organization on specific holidays, with a consistency that suggested both intimate knowledge of their activities and access to information that should have been restricted to law enforcement or family insiders. The killer's choice of victims was not random, but followed patterns that revealed deep understanding of the Falcone family's hierarchy and operations, suggesting that whoever was responsible possessed either extensive surveillance capabilities or insider knowledge of the organization's most closely guarded secrets. The first murder occurred on Halloween, a date that would prove prophetic in its implications for the supernatural atmosphere of dread and uncertainty that would surround the entire case. The victim was a mid-level enforcer whose death sent ripples of concern throughout the Falcone organization, while also serving notice to law enforcement that a new player had entered Gotham's criminal landscape. The precision of the killing, combined with the symbolic significance of the date, suggested that this was not the work of a conventional hitman or rival gang member, but something far more personal and psychologically complex. The investigation that followed revealed the limitations of Gotham's law enforcement apparatus and the complex relationships between police, prosecutors, and the criminal organizations they were supposed to be fighting. Commissioner Gordon's attempts to pursue the case according to proper legal procedures were consistently frustrated by evidence that disappeared, witnesses who recanted their testimony, and superior officers who seemed more interested in maintaining the status quo than in solving murders that threatened to expose the corruption that permeated every level of city government. District Attorney Harvey Dent's involvement in the Holiday investigation represented both the best hope for legitimate justice and the seeds of the tragedy that would ultimately transform him from crusading prosecutor into one of Gotham's most dangerous criminals. Dent's psychological profile during this period revealed a man under tremendous pressure from multiple directions: the legitimate demands of his office, the criminal organizations that sought to corrupt or eliminate him, the political pressures from superiors who preferred stability to justice, and his own internal struggles with anger and frustration that would eventually manifest in far more destructive ways. The relationship between Harvey and Gilda Dent during the Holiday murders would later prove to be one of the most crucial and mysterious aspects of the entire case, though its significance was not apparent to investigators at the time. Gilda's position as the wife of Gotham's most prominent prosecutor provided her with access to information about ongoing investigations and criminal activities that few civilians ever possessed, while her own psychological struggles with the isolation and danger that came from being married to such a high-profile target created pressures that were invisible to outside observers, but increasingly unbearable to her personally. Batman's investigation of the Holiday murders revealed both his strengths as a detective and the limitations that his vigilante status imposed upon his ability to gather evidence and pursue leads through conventional channels. His access to crime scenes and witnesses was often superior to that of official law enforcement, yet his inability to operate openly or share information freely created barriers to cooperation that sometimes allowed crucial evidence to be overlooked or misinterpreted. The psychological profile of the Holiday killer that emerged from Batman's analysis suggested someone with intimate knowledge of the Falcone family's operations and personal relationships, access to their schedules and security arrangements, and the kind of patient planning ability that indicated long-term commitment to a specific agenda rather than opportunistic violence. The killer's choice to strike only on holidays indicated either deep psychological significance attached to these dates or a calculated attempt to create maximum psychological impact through the subversion of occasions typically associated with family gatherings and celebration. As the murders continued through the calendar year, the pattern that emerged was both more complex and more personally devastating than initial analysis had suggested. The victims were not chosen randomly from among Falcone family members, but selected according to criteria that reflected deep understanding of their individual roles within the organization and their personal relationships with key figures. Some killings appeared designed to send specific messages, others to eliminate particular capabilities or sources of information, and still others to create maximum emotional impact on surviving family members. The Christmas murder proved particularly significant in its implications for the case's eventual resolution, as it targeted a victim whose death would have profound psychological impact on the Falcone family, while also eliminating someone whose knowledge of the organization's operations made him a valuable potential informant for law enforcement. The precision with which this killing was executed, combined with the symbolic weight of the date, suggested that the holiday killer was not merely eliminating enemies but conducting a form of psychological warfare designed to destabilize the entire criminal organization from within. The New Year's Eve murder that concluded the initial cycle of holiday killings created the appearance that the case had reached its natural conclusion. Yet the psychological dynamics that had driven the original crimes remained unresolved and continued to influence the behavior of all the major participants. The transformation of Harvey Dent into Two-Face during this period was directly connected to the pressures and revelations that had emerged from the holiday investigation, demonstrating how the search for truth about one set of crimes could create conditions that led to entirely new forms of criminal activity. The apparent resolution of the holiday case with Alberto Falcone's confession and arrest should have provided closure for all the individuals and institutions that had been affected by the year-long reign of terror, yet instead it opened new questions that proved even more disturbing and complex than the original mystery. Alberto's claim to have been responsible for all the holiday murders was both supported by certain evidence and contradicted by other aspects of the case that suggested a more complicated reality involving multiple perpetrators with different motivations and methods. The confession scene itself revealed the psychological toll that the holiday murders had taken on the Falcone family, with Alberto's apparent desire to claim credit for crimes that had destroyed his father's organization and killed his relatives, suggesting either profound mental disturbance or calculated attempt to protect others who might have been involved. The mixture of pride and desperation in his admission of guilt created uncertainty about whether he was confessing to crimes he had actually committed or accepting responsibility for actions taken by others for reasons that remained hidden from investigators. The final revelation that would cast doubt on Alberto's sole responsibility for the holiday murders came through Gilda Dent's private confession, delivered in circumstances that made it impossible to verify independently, while also providing psychological insights that explained aspects of the case that had never been satisfactorily resolved through official investigation. Her admission that she had been responsible for at least some of the early killings was motivated not by criminal intent, but by desperate desire to protect her husband from the criminal organizations that were seeking to corrupt or eliminate him. Gilda's psychological state during the period when she claimed to have committed the murders revealed the profound isolation and fear that characterized the lives of those connected to Gotham's criminal justice system, particularly family members who understood the dangers their loved ones faced, but were powerless to protect them through conventional means. Her decision to take direct action against the Falcone organization represented both ultimate expression of spousal devotion and complete breakdown of the moral constraints that should have prevented such extreme measures. The methodology that Gilda described for her alleged crimes was consistent with the evidence from several of the holiday murders, yet also raised questions about her access to information and resources that would have been necessary to execute such precisely planned assassinations. Her knowledge of the Falcone family's schedules and security arrangements could have come from her husband's investigations, Yet her ability to carry out the actual killings suggested either capabilities that she had previously concealed or assistance from accomplices whose identities remained unknown. The psychological motivation that Gilda claimed for her actions revealed the gendered dimensions of Gotham's corruption and the particular ways that women connected to the criminal justice system were victimized by circumstances beyond their control. Her perception that Harvey was being destroyed by his efforts to fight corruption that was too powerful and pervasive to be defeated through legal means led her to conclude that direct action against specific criminals was the only way to doctrine, protect her marriage and her husband's sanity. The timeline of Gilda's alleged involvement in the holiday murders suggested that her criminal activities had ceased before the later killings that Alberto claimed to have committed, indicating that the case had indeed involved multiple perpetrators, whose activities had overlapped in ways that created the appearance of a single killer operating according to a consistent methodology. This revelation transformed the holiday mystery from a question of individual identity into a more complex inquiry about how multiple individuals with different motivations could have contributed to a pattern of crimes that appeared to be the work of a single mastermind. The implications of multiple holiday killers extended beyond the immediate question of criminal responsibility to encompass broader themes about the ways that Gotham's corruption created conditions where ordinary people could be driven to extraordinary acts of violence. Both Gilda Dent and Alberto Falcone had been responding to pressures and circumstances that were products of the city's criminal ecosystem, suggesting that the holiday murders were symptoms of systemic failures rather than simply individual criminal choices. The deliberate ambiguity that surrounded the final resolution of the holiday case reflected sophisticated understanding of how mystery and uncertainty could serve thematic purposes that were more important than providing definitive answers to specific questions. By refusing to clearly establish who had been responsible for which murders, the story maintained focus on the psychological and social conditions that had made such crimes possible rather than reducing the narrative to simple question of individual guilt or innocence. The hangman murders that followed the holiday case represented both continuation and evolution of the patterns established during the earlier crimes, with a new killer targeting law enforcement personnel rather than organized crime figures, while maintaining the symbolic use of holidays and the precision that had characterized the original killings. The shift in targets from criminals to police officers revealed new dimensions of Gotham's institutional failures and the ways that corruption within law enforcement could create conditions where officers themselves became targets for vigilante justice. Sofia Gigante's eventual identification as the hangman killer provided answers to some questions while raising others about the relationship between the two series of murders and the extent to which they represented coordinated campaign against Gotham's criminal justice system or separate responses to related grievances. Her motivation for targeting police officers was rooted in legitimate anger about corruption and complicity that had allowed her father's criminal organization to operate with impunity, yet her methods revealed the same psychological patterns that had characterized the holiday murders. The investigation of the hangman case was complicated by the same institutional failures and personal conflicts that had hampered efforts to solve the holiday murders, with law enforcement officials reluctant to pursue leads that might expose their own corruption, while also struggling to protect themselves and their colleagues from an unknown assailant whose knowledge of police procedures and schedules suggested either inside information or extensive surveillance capabilities. The resolution of the hangman case, like its predecessor, remained deliberately incomplete and ambiguous, with sufficient evidence to support official conclusions. while also leaving room for alternative interpretations and ongoing uncertainty about the full extent of the conspiracy that had produced both series of murders. The pattern of seasonal violence that had begun with Halloween would continue to influence Gotham's criminal landscape for years to come, creating an atmosphere of dread and uncertainty that affected everyone connected to the city's criminal justice system. The legacy of the Holiday and Hangman murders extended far beyond their immediate impact on specific individuals and organizations to encompass fundamental changes in how law enforcement, criminal organizations, and masked vigilantes operated within Gotham's unique ecosystem of corruption and violence. The demonstration that seemingly ordinary citizens could be driven to systematic murder when pushed beyond their psychological limits served as warning about the consequences of allowing institutional failure and systemic corruption to continue unchecked. The transformation of Harvey Dent into Two-Face during this period represented perhaps the most significant long-term consequence of the Holiday investigation, as the pressures and revelations that emerged from the case contributed directly to his psychological breakdown and criminal transformation. The loss of Gotham's most effective prosecutor to madness and criminality created power vacuum that would be filled by less capable and more corrupt officials, ensuring that the conditions that had made the Holiday murders possible would continue to exist and evolve. The questions that remained unanswered at the conclusion of both murder series continued to haunt Batman's understanding of justice and his effectiveness as protector of innocent life, forcing him to confront the possibility that some crimes could never be fully solved, and some forms of corruption were too deeply rooted to be eliminated through conventional heroic methods. The seasonal killers had succeeded in demonstrating that even the world's greatest detective could be stymied by mysteries that involved multiple perpetrators, institutional complicity, and psychological motivations that transcended simple criminal intent. In the endless chess match between Batman and the criminal masterminds who seek to prove their intellectual superiority over the world's greatest detective, there exists one challenge that stands apart from all others in its audacious simplicity and its devastating implications for both the hero's reputation and his understanding of his own capabilities. This is the tale of Edward Nygma's ultimate gambit, a riddle so fiendishly complex and psychologically sophisticated that it would test not merely Batman's deductive abilities but the very foundations of his identity as an infallible solver of mysteries and protector of truth in a city built upon layers of deception and corruption. The evolution of the Riddler from theatrical gimmick villain to genuine intellectual threat had been a gradual process that paralleled Batman's own development from urban legend to established protector, yet the transformation was no less dramatic for its incremental nature. In his earliest incarnations, Edward Nygma had been little more than a colorful distraction, a criminal whose compulsive need to leave clues and riddles at his crime scenes made him more nuisance than genuine danger to either Batman or the citizens of Gotham City. His puzzles, while clever in their construction, were ultimately solvable through the application of conventional logic and sufficient time for analysis. Yet as the years passed and his encounters with Batman accumulated, something fundamental began to change in the Riddler's approach to his obsession with intellectual superiority and public recognition of his mental capabilities. The repeated experience of having his carefully crafted puzzles solved and his elaborate schemes unraveled by Batman's detective work created in him a form of psychological pressure that gradually transformed his relatively harmless compulsion into something far more dangerous and personally driven. Each defeat became not merely a setback, but a challenge to his core identity as the most intellectually gifted criminal in Gotham City. The realization that his previous riddles and puzzles had been clever but ultimately conventional led Nygma to explore new territories of intellectual challenge. seeking forms of mental competition that would push both himself and his nemesis beyond the comfortable boundaries of traditional detective work and logical analysis. His research into mathematics, philosophy, linguistics, and psychology expanded far beyond what was necessary for his criminal activities, becoming instead a comprehensive education in the nature of consciousness, knowledge, and the limits of human rational capability. The concept that began to obsess the Riddler during this period of intellectual development was the possibility of creating a puzzle that was not merely difficult but genuinely unsolvable. A riddle that would expose the limitations of even the most brilliant detective while simultaneously proving the superiority of the mind that had conceived it. This was not simply a matter of increasing complexity or obscurity, but rather a fundamental challenge to the assumptions that underlay all previous forms of intellectual competition between criminal and crime fighter. The theoretical framework that Nigma developed for his ultimate riddle drew upon paradoxes and logical contradictions that had puzzled philosophers and mathematicians for centuries, incorporating elements that seemed to violate basic principles of rational thought while maintaining internal consistency that made them impossible to dismiss as mere wordplay or semantic trickery. The riddle would need to be simultaneously meaningful and meaningless, solvable and unsolvable, true and false, creating a form of cognitive dissonance that would challenge not only Batman's detective abilities, but his understanding of reality itself. The psychological dimensions of this ultimate challenge were as important to Nigma as its intellectual complexity, for he understood that the most devastating defeats were those that attacked not merely one's capabilities but one's sense of identity and self-worth. Batman's effectiveness as a detective depended not only on his analytical skills, but on his confidence in those skills, and his belief that every mystery could eventually be solved through sufficient application of logic, observation, and determination. A riddle that genuinely could not be solved would undermine these fundamental assumptions about the nature of truth and knowledge. The preparation that went into creating this ultimate puzzle consumed months of intensive research and experimentation, as Nigma tested various approaches and refined his methodology through trial runs that pushed the boundaries of conventional puzzle construction. He studied the history of unsolved mathematical problems, examined philosophical paradoxes that had resisted resolution for millennia, and analyzed psychological studies of cognitive limitations and the circumstances under which even brilliant minds could be overwhelmed or confused. The setting he chose for presenting his ultimate riddle was itself part of the psychological warfare he intended to wage against Batman, selecting a location and circumstances that would maximize the pressure and minimize the time available for careful analysis. The challenge would be presented not as an academic exercise, but as a life or death situation where failure to solve the puzzle would result in genuine consequences for innocent victims, creating additional stress that would interfere with the kind of calm, methodical thinking that Batman typically employed in his detective work. The riddle itself, when finally revealed, was simultaneously elegant and incomprehensible, incorporating multiple layers of meaning and interpretation that seemed to shift and change depending upon the analytical approach employed to examine them. The surface level appeared to be a conventional word puzzle or logical problem, yet deeper examination revealed mathematical relationships, linguistic ambiguities, and philosophical implications that created an ever-expanding web of interconnected meanings and possible solutions. Batman's initial response to the challenge followed his established patterns of systematic analysis and logical deduction, yet as he delved deeper into the puzzle's complexities, he began to encounter obstacles and contradictions that resisted his usual methods of resolution. Elements that seemed clearly established would shift or disappear when examined from different perspectives, while apparent solutions would lead to new problems that were even more complex and confusing than the original formulation. The psychological toll of struggling with an apparently unsolvable puzzle began to manifest itself in ways that were unprecedented in Batman's experience, creating forms of doubt and frustration that he had never encountered during his previous encounters with criminal masterminds or complex mysteries. His confidence in his own intellectual capabilities, which had been reinforced through years of successful detective work, was slowly eroded by the accumulating evidence that this particular challenge might genuinely exceed his abilities. The broader implications of the unsolved riddle extended far beyond the immediate contest between Batman and the Riddler to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of knowledge, the limits of human rational capability, and the possibility that some truths might be inherently unknowable. The existence of a genuine mystery that could not be solved challenged basic assumptions about detective work and criminal investigation that formed the foundation of Batman's entire approach to fighting crime and protecting innocent life. The response of Gotham's criminal community to news of Batman's apparent failure to solve the Riddler's ultimate puzzle was immediate and significant, with other villains interpreting his difficulty as evidence that the world's greatest detective was not as intellectually superior as his reputation suggested. This perception encouraged more ambitious and sophisticated criminal schemes, as various masterminds sought to exploit what they perceived as a weakness or limitation in Batman's capabilities. The academic and scientific communities also took notice of the unsolved riddle, with mathematicians, philosophers, and puzzle experts attempting their own analyses and interpretations of the challenge that had apparently stumped Batman. The publication of the riddle in various forms led to extensive debate and discussion about its nature and possible solutions, yet none of the proposed answers achieved the kind of definitive resolution that would have satisfied the original challenge. The ongoing nature of the mystery created a new form of psychological warfare that extended far beyond the immediate confrontation between Batman and the Riddler, to encompass broader questions about intellectual authority and the reliability of expertise in complex analytical situations. The possibility that even the most capable detective could encounter problems that exceeded his abilities introduced elements of uncertainty and doubt into every subsequent investigation and criminal encounter. The various theories and attempted solutions that emerged from academic and amateur analysts revealed the complexity of the riddle, while also demonstrating the difficulty of achieving consensus about its meaning or resolution. Some interpretations focused on mathematical relationships and numerical patterns. Others emphasized linguistic ambiguities and semantic contradictions, while still others proposed psychological or philosophical frameworks for understanding the puzzle's significance. The Riddler's own response to the ongoing failure to solve his ultimate challenge was characterized by a mixture of satisfaction and surprise that reflected his own uncertainty about whether the puzzle was genuinely unsolvable or simply more difficult than he had anticipated. His public statements about the riddle were deliberately ambiguous, neither confirming nor denying various proposed solutions while maintaining that the true answer remained undiscovered and perhaps undiscoverable. The impact on Batman's reputation and self-perception was profound and lasting, creating forms of intellectual humility and recognition of limitation that had not previously characterized his approach to detective work and criminal investigation. The experience of encountering a problem that might genuinely exceed his capabilities forced him to reconsider his assumptions about the nature of truth and the possibility of achieving complete understanding of complex situations. The broader philosophical implications of the unsolved riddle touched upon questions that had occupied thinkers for centuries regarding the relationship between consciousness and reality, the limits of rational analysis, and the possibility that some aspects of existence might be inherently mysterious or paradoxical. The riddle served as a concrete example of how intellectual challenges could transcend simple problem solving to become explorations of the fundamental nature of knowledge and understanding. The ongoing debate about whether Batman had actually solved the riddle and chosen to keep the solution secret added another layer of mystery to an already complex situation, with various theories proposed about his possible motivations for maintaining silence if he had indeed discovered the answer. Some suggested that the solution might be too dangerous to reveal. Others proposed that it might undermine confidence in rational analysis and logical thinking, while still others argued that admitting to having solved it would diminish the riddle's power as a humbling reminder of intellectual limitation. The legacy of the Riddler's ultimate challenge extended far beyond its immediate impact on Batman and the criminal community to influence how both heroes and villains approached intellectual competition and the demonstration of mental superiority. The possibility that some problems might be genuinely unsolvable introduced elements of caution and humility into criminal schemes that had previously relied upon assumptions about the inevitable triumph of superior planning, analysis. The educational value of the unsolved riddle as a reminder of the limits of human knowledge and the importance of intellectual humility made it a subject of ongoing study and discussion in academic circles, where it served as a concrete example of how even the most capable minds could encounter challenges that exceeded their abilities. The riddle became a touchstone for discussions about the nature of consciousness, the reliability of logical analysis, and the possibility that some truths might be inherently unknowable. The transformation of the Riddler from gimmick villain to genuine intellectual threat was completed through his creation of this ultimate challenge, establishing him as a worthy opponent whose capabilities matched or exceeded those of his nemesis in specific areas of mental competition. The riddle served as proof that criminal intelligence could evolve and adapt to match the capabilities of even the most formidable opponents, creating ongoing challenges that prevented any sense of complacency or overconfidence. The question of whether the riddle was genuinely unsolvable or simply more difficult than previous challenges remained a subject of debate that extended far beyond the immediate participants in the original confrontation. The various proposed solutions and analytical frameworks that emerged from continued study of the puzzle revealed its richness and complexity, while also demonstrating the difficulty of achieving definitive resolution of problems that operated at the intersection of logic, language, and consciousness. In the end, the true significance of the Riddler's ultimate riddle lay not in whether it could be solved, but in its demonstration of how intellectual challenges could transcend simple competition to become explorations of the fundamental nature of knowledge and understanding. The puzzle served as a reminder that even the most capable minds encountered limitations, and that some mysteries might be more valuable as sources of ongoing inquiry than as problems to be definitively resolved. In the grand tapestry of tragedy that has shaped the heroes who walk Gotham's shadowed streets, few threads run as deeply crimson or as profoundly transformative as those woven by the events that transpired beneath the colourful canvas of Haley's circus on that fateful evening when innocents died, alongside two of the most gifted performers ever to grace a trapeze. The story of the Flying Graysons represents more than a simple tale of murder and revenge, more than the tragic accident that created the first Robin and gave Batman his most trusted ally. It is a mystery that reaches into the very foundations of Gotham's hidden power structures, connecting childhood trauma to ancient conspiracies, and revealing how the city's corruption can twist even the most innocent institutions into instruments of recruitment and control for forces that have operated in darkness for centuries. The Graysons themselves were artists in the truest sense of the word, performers whose mastery of aerial acrobatics had elevated what might have been mere carnival entertainment into something approaching pure poetry in motion. John and Mary Grayson possessed that rare combination of technical skill, natural grace, and absolute trust in one another that made their performances genuinely breathtaking rather than simply dangerous spectacles designed to thrill audiences hungry for vicarious excitement. Their act represented the culmination of generations of circus tradition, skills passed down through family lines that stretched back to the earliest days of traveling entertainment, when such shows served not merely as diversions, but as preservers of ancient traditions and keepers of secrets that predated modern civilization. The young Richard Grayson, who witnessed his parents' death from the audience that night, possessed the same natural gifts that had made his family legendary throughout the circus world. Yet he also carried within him the potential for something far greater and more significant than even the most accomplished acrobatic career could provide. His combination of physical ability, intellectual curiosity, and moral instincts would have made him valuable to any number of organizations and institutions. Yet it was precisely these qualities that made him a target for forces that specialized in identifying and recruiting individuals with exceptional potential for purposes that extended far beyond conventional performance or entertainment. The official narrative surrounding the Graysons' death has remained remarkably consistent across multiple tellings and investigations. Yet this consistency itself raises troubling questions about the thoroughness of the original investigation and the willingness of various authorities to accept convenient explanations rather than pursuing leads that might have revealed uncomfortable truths about the circus itself and its connections to Gotham's broader criminal ecosystem. According to the established account, Tony Zuko, a representative of one of Gotham's organized crime families, had demanded protection money from the circus management and, when his demands were refused, had arranged for the sabotage of the Graysons' trapeze equipment as an example to discourage further resistance. The simplicity of this explanation has always been both its strength and its fundamental weakness, providing clear motive and method, while also failing to account for various inconsistencies and unexplained elements that have emerged from more detailed examination of the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. The choice of the Graysons as targets, rather than circus management or ownership, suggested either profound miscalculation on Zuko's part about who actually controlled the circus's financial decisions, or, alternatively, the existence of hidden factors that made the Graysons specifically valuable targets for reasons that extended beyond simple intimidation tactics. The investigation conducted by the Gotham City Police Department into the Graysons' murders was characterized by the same institutional limitations and suspect priorities that had hampered official responses to other high-profile crimes throughout the city's history. The rapid identification of Tony Zuko as the primary suspect, combined with the apparent lack of interest in exploring alternative theories or investigating the broader context of the crime, suggested either remarkable efficiency in detective work or deliberately restricted scope designed to avoid uncovering information that might prove embarrassing or dangerous to various interested parties. The subsequent career of Tony Zuko himself became a subject of considerable mystery and speculation, with different accounts providing conflicting information about his fate following the Grayson murders and his role within Gotham's organized crime hierarchy. In some versions, he was portrayed as a mid-level enforcer whose actions had exceeded his authority and who was subsequently eliminated by his own organization to prevent further complications. Other accounts suggested that he continued to operate within Gotham's criminal underworld for years following the circus tragedy, indicating either protection from powerful allies or skills at avoiding law enforcement that exceeded his apparent capabilities. The most disturbing possibility regarding Zuko's involvement in the Grayson murders was that he had been acting not on behalf of traditional organized crime interests, but as an agent of more sophisticated and secretive organizations, whose purposes extended far beyond conventional criminal activities. The precision with which the trapeze sabotage had been executed suggested technical knowledge and planning capabilities that exceeded what would normally be expected from routine extortion operations, while the specific targeting of the Graysons rather than circus management indicated possible advanced knowledge of their significance that could only have come from extensive surveillance and intelligence gathering. The revelation of Haley's circus's connections to the Court of Owls transformed the Grayson tragedy from a simple case of criminal intimidation into something far more complex and sinister, suggesting that the murders had been orchestrated not to collect protection money, but to eliminate individuals who posed threats to the court's recruitment operations, or who possessed knowledge that could expose their infiltration of seemingly innocent institutions. The circus's role as a recruiting ground for potential talons added layers of meaning to the Graysons' death that extended far beyond personal tragedy to encompass systematic exploitation of vulnerable individuals and the corruption of institutions dedicated to bringing joy and wonder to audiences throughout the region. The Court of Owls' methods for identifying and recruiting suitable candidates for their Talon program required extensive observation and evaluation of potential subjects, processes that could be conducted most effectively within environments where exceptional physical abilities and psychological profiles could be observed over extended periods without arousing suspicion. Traveling circuses provided ideal cover for such operations, allowing court agents to observe performers and their families while maintaining legitimate explanations for their presence and interest in circus operations. The specific qualities that made individuals suitable for transformation into Talons closely matched those possessed by the Grayson family and other circus performers, creating natural overlap between the skills required for aerial acrobatics and those necessary for assassination and infiltration work. The combination of physical conditioning, spatial awareness, fearlessness in dangerous situations, and ability to perform under pressure that characterized successful circus performers represented precisely the foundation that court training programs were designed to build upon and enhance for their own purposes. The possibility that Dick Grayson had been marked for recruitment by the Court of Owls from childhood added profound psychological dimensions to his eventual adoption by Bruce Wayne and transformation into Robin, suggesting that his natural heroic instincts and moral development might have been deliberately shaped by forces seeking to prevent his corruption by the court's influence. The intervention of Batman in Dick's life following his parents' death could be interpreted either as fortunate coincidence or as part of a broader struggle between different factions seeking to control exceptional individuals for their own purposes. The training and conditioning that the court employed to transform recruits into Talons bore uncomfortable similarities to the methods that Batman used to prepare his various protégés for their roles as crime fighters and guardians of innocent life. Both approaches emphasized physical conditioning, combat training, stealth techniques, and psychological preparation for operating in dangerous environments, raising questions about the fundamental differences between heroic and villainous applications of similar methodologies and skill sets. The long-term implications of the court's recruitment activities extended far beyond individual cases to encompass systematic exploitation of vulnerable populations and the corruption of institutions that should have provided safety and opportunity for disadvantaged individuals. The use of circuses, orphanages, and similar organizations as sources of potential talons represented a form of institutional abuse that violated the trust of communities and families who had believed they were supporting beneficial activities that helped rather than harmed young people. The psychological trauma experienced by individuals who discovered that organizations they had trusted and respected were actually fronts for criminal recruitment created additional layers of victimization that extended far beyond the immediate harm caused by specific crimes or violent acts. The revelation that seemingly innocent and wholesome institutions had been corrupted for sinister purposes undermined confidence in social systems and community organizations that formed the foundation of civil society. The various conspiracy theories that emerged around the Grayson murders reflected broader patterns of suspicion and mistrust that characterized Gotham's civic culture, yet they also served important functions in maintaining attention on unresolved questions and encouraging continued investigation of official narratives that might conceal uncomfortable truths. The willingness of community members to question authority and demand accountability, even when such efforts were discouraged or actively suppressed, represented forms of civic engagement that were essential for maintaining democratic institutions and protecting vulnerable populations. The impact of the Grayson tragedy on Dick's subsequent development as Robin, and later as Nightwing, revealed both the resilience of the human spirit in overcoming traumatic experiences and the ways in which early trauma could be channeled into positive purposes through proper support and guidance. His transformation from orphaned circus performer into effective crime fighter demonstrated that even the most devastating losses could serve as foundations for meaningful contributions to society when they were processed through healthy relationships and constructive activities. The mentorship relationship that developed between Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson provided a model for how adults could help young people overcome traumatic experiences and develop their potential in positive directions. Yet it also raised questions about the appropriateness of involving minors in dangerous activities and the long-term psychological effects of exposure to violence and criminal behavior during formative developmental periods. The balance between providing meaningful purpose and protecting childhood innocence represented ongoing challenges that had no easy or definitive solutions. The legacy of Haley's circus in Dick Grayson's adult life continued to influence his understanding of family, community, and professional responsibility in ways that extended far beyond his crime-fighting activities to encompass his relationships with other circus performers, his involvement in youth development programs, and his approach to mentoring individuals who had experienced similar traumatic losses. His connection to the circus world provided him with resources and perspectives that complemented his training as a crime fighter, while also maintaining links to the artistic and cultural traditions that had shaped his earliest identity. The ongoing mystery surrounding the full extent of the Court of Owls' involvement in circus operations throughout Gotham and the broader region suggested that the Grayson murders represented only one incident in a much larger pattern of exploitation and recruitment that had affected countless families and communities over many decades. The systematic nature of these operations indicated planning and organization that extended far beyond opportunistic criminal activity to encompass comprehensive strategies for identifying, acquiring, and controlling human resources for specific purposes. The broader implications of institutional corruption within seemingly innocent organizations extended beyond circuses to encompass questions about how other community institutions might have been infiltrated or compromised by criminal organizations seeking to exploit their access to vulnerable populations. Schools, youth sports programs, religious organizations, and charitable foundations all represented potential targets for similar forms of systematic exploitation that could operate for years or decades without detection by oversight authorities or community members. The responsibility of community members, law enforcement officials, and civic leaders to maintain vigilance against such infiltration and corruption represented ongoing challenges that required sustained attention and resources. Yet, the rewards of such efforts in terms of protecting vulnerable individuals and maintaining public trust in important institutions justified whatever costs and difficulties might be involved in conducting thorough investigations and implementing appropriate safeguards. The memory of John and Mary Grayson and the artistic legacy they represented continued to inspire performers throughout the circus world, while also serving as reminders of the courage required to pursue excellence in dangerous and demanding fields where success depended upon trust, skill, and unwavering commitment to safety and mutual support. Their deaths had been tragedies that robbed the world of exceptional artists and loving parents, yet their influence lived on through their son and the countless individuals whose lives had been touched by their performances and their example. In the end, the mystery of the Flying Graysons encompassed not only questions about who was ultimately responsible for their deaths and what hidden agendas might have motivated the crime, but also broader inquiries into how communities could protect themselves against exploitation, while maintaining the openness and trust that made meaningful artistic and cultural activities possible. The balance between security and accessibility, between caution and opportunity, represented ongoing challenges that every generation would need to address anew as circumstances and threats evolved in response to changing social and technological conditions. In the constellation of losses that have marked Batman's long crusade against the forces that corrupt and destroy innocent life, there exists one wound so profound, so personally devastating, that it transcends the usual categories of heroic tragedy to become something approaching existential crisis. This is not merely another casualty in the endless war between good and evil, not simply another victim claimed by the violence that perpetually threatens those who dare to stand against Gotham's darkness, but rather the loss that strikes at the very heart of what makes Batman's mission possible and meaningful. The death of Alfred Pennyworth represents more than the murder of a beloved father figure. It embodies the ultimate failure of protection, the one moment when the world's greatest detective was absent from the place where his presence was most desperately needed, leaving behind questions that no amount of investigation or analysis can adequately address. Alfred Thaddeus Crane Pennyworth had served the Wayne family for decades before Bruce ever donned the cape and cowl, yet his role evolved and deepened with each passing year of Batman's crusade, until he became something far more significant than a mere employee or even a trusted advisor. He was the conscience that guided Bruce Wayne's choices, the steady hand that kept Wayne Manor functioning as both sanctuary and base of operations, the voice of reason that provided perspective when obsession threatened to consume the man behind the mask. His medical training enabled him to serve as field medic for injuries that could not be treated in conventional hospitals, while his military background provided strategic insights that proved invaluable in planning operations against Gotham's most dangerous criminals. The psychological relationship between Bruce Wayne and Alfred transcended conventional categories of employer and employee, guardian and ward, or even father and son, evolving instead into something that existed at the intersection of all these bonds, while also possessing unique characteristics that reflected the extraordinary circumstances of their shared existence. Alfred's knowledge of Bruce's secret identity and his willing participation in activities that placed him in constant danger created a form of partnership that was simultaneously protective and vulnerable, supportive and precarious, essential and ultimately fragile, in ways that neither man fully appreciated until it was too late to alter the circumstances that would lead to tragedy. The events that culminated in Alfred's death began not with any single dramatic confrontation, but with the slow, methodical campaign that Bane had orchestrated to systematically dismantle every aspect of Batman's effectiveness as Gotham's protector, while simultaneously seizing control of the city's institutions and infrastructure. The City of Bane's storyline represented perhaps the most comprehensive and sophisticated assault ever mounted against Batman's mission, combining physical conquest with psychological warfare in ways that attacked not only his capabilities as a crime fighter, but his identity as Bruce Wayne and his relationships with the people who made his dual existence possible. Bane's understanding of Batman's psychological vulnerabilities had evolved considerably since their first encounter, progressing from crude attempts at physical domination to subtle manipulations that exploited the deep emotional bonds that connected Bruce Wayne to his extended family and support network. The strategy that Bane employed during his occupation of Gotham was designed not merely to defeat Batman in combat, but to demonstrate the futility of his entire approach to protecting innocent life, proving that even the most dedicated and capable protector could be rendered powerless when faced with enemies willing to target those he cared about most. The systematic isolation of Batman from his allies and resources created conditions where Alfred's position became increasingly precarious. Yet the old butler's unwavering commitment to his duties and his determination to maintain Wayne Manor's operations made him reluctant to accept protective measures that might have kept him safe but would have compromised his ability to support Bruce's mission. The fundamental tension between protecting Alfred and utilizing his capabilities reflected broader challenges that Batman had always faced in balancing the safety of those he cared about against their willingness to accept risks in service of greater good. The choice that Alfred made to remain at his post despite the obvious dangers represented both the nobility of his character and the tragic limitations of his position within Batman's world, where the people closest to the hero inevitably became targets for enemies, seeking leverage against someone who seemed otherwise invulnerable to conventional forms of attack. His decision was motivated not by recklessness or failure to understand the risks involved, but by deep understanding of how essential his continued presence was to maintaining the infrastructure and emotional support that enabled Batman's mission to continue functioning, even under the most adverse circumstances. Damian Wayne's forced witnessing of Alfred's execution added layers of horror and psychological trauma to what was already an unimaginable tragedy, transforming a private loss into a public demonstration of Bane's power, while also ensuring that the youngest member of the Bat family would carry the burden of that memory for the remainder of his life. The calculated cruelty of forcing a child to observe the murder of someone he loved as a grandfather figure revealed the depths of evil that Bane was willing to embrace in pursuit of his goals, while also serving his strategic purpose of maximizing the psychological damage inflicted upon the entire Wayne family. The absence of Bruce Wayne during the crucial moments when Alfred's life hung in the balance created forms of guilt and self-recrimination that no previous failure or setback had ever generated in Batman's psyche, striking at the fundamental assumptions that had sustained his mission for decades and challenging his understanding of his own priorities and responsibilities. The realization that his strategic decisions and operational commitments had left Alfred vulnerable at precisely the moment when protection was most needed, forced Bruce to confront uncomfortable truths about the costs of his crusade and the ways in which his dedication to protecting strangers had sometimes come at the expense of those closest to him. The investigation that followed Alfred's death revealed both the meticulous planning that had gone into Bane's campaign and the limited options that had been available to prevent the tragedy. Yet these findings provided little comfort to those struggling to process the loss and understand how such a devastating outcome could have been avoided. The evidence clearly established that Bane had orchestrated the entire sequence of events with the specific goal of placing Batman in an impossible position where any choice he made would result in the loss of something or someone he valued deeply. The broader strategic context of Alfred's murder within Bane's overall campaign against Batman demonstrated how effectively the villain had learned to exploit the psychological and emotional vulnerabilities that came with caring about other people and accepting responsibility for their safety. The killing was not an act of passion or opportunistic violence, but rather a calculated move designed to achieve maximum psychological impact, while also eliminating someone whose support and guidance had been essential to Batman's effectiveness as both crime fighter and human being. The response of Gotham's criminal community to news of Alfred's death was immediate and significant, with various villains and criminal organizations recognizing that Batman's loss represented not merely personal tragedy, but operational vulnerability that could be exploited through additional attacks on his remaining support network and emotional connections. The demonstration that even someone as seemingly well protected as Alfred could be eliminated sent clear messages to anyone else who might be considering offering assistance or cooperation to Batman in his ongoing efforts to restore order to the city. The impact on the broader Bat family was equally profound and long-lasting, creating rifts and tensions that would influence their relationships and operational effectiveness for months or years following the immediate crisis. The guilt that each member felt about their own role in events leading up to Alfred's death, combined with their individual ways of processing grief and trauma, led to conflicts and misunderstandings that threatened to tear apart the very network of relationships that Alfred had worked so hard to nurture and maintain. Damian Wayne's particular burden as the direct witness to Alfred's execution created psychological trauma that manifested itself in increased aggression, withdrawal from family relationships, and difficulty trusting that other loved ones would remain safe from similar fates. His young mind struggled to process not only the immediate horror of witnessing violent death, but also the broader implications about the dangers inherent in being connected to Batman's mission and the ways in which love and loyalty could become weapons used by enemies against those they targeted. The practical consequences of losing Alfred's daily support and management of Wayne Manor's operations created additional stresses that compounded the emotional trauma of his death, forcing other members of the Bat family to assume responsibilities and roles for which they were not adequately prepared, while also highlighting how much of Batman's effectiveness had depended upon Alfred's behind-the-scenes contributions. The mundane but essential tasks of maintaining equipment, coordinating communications, providing medical care, and managing the complex logistics of crime-fighting operations had been performed so efficiently and quietly that their difficulty and importance had been largely invisible until they were no longer being handled by Alfred's expert attention. The question of whether Bruce Wayne could have prevented Alfred's death by making different strategic choices or accepting different priorities became a source of ongoing torment that no amount of rational analysis could definitively resolve, creating the kind of uncertainty and self-doubt that had the potential to paralyze rather than motivate future decision-making. The various scenarios and alternative approaches that might have led to different outcomes existed only in speculation and hindsight, yet they provided endless fuel for guilt and recrimination that served no constructive purpose while consuming psychological energy that was desperately needed for other challenges. The broader philosophical implications of Alfred's death extended beyond questions of tactical success or failure to encompass fundamental issues about the nature of heroism and the acceptable costs of pursuing justice in a world where evil consistently sought to exploit the compassionate, connections that made heroes human and vulnerable. The targeting of non-combatants and support personnel represented a form of warfare that challenged traditional notions of honorable conflict, while also revealing the limitations of heroic codes that assumed enemies would respect certain boundaries and distinctions. The memorial services and tributes that honored Alfred's memory provided opportunities for reflection on his contributions and legacy, while also serving important psychological functions in helping those who had known and loved him begin the difficult process of accepting his loss and finding ways to continue their shared mission despite the enormous hole that his death had created in their personal and professional lives. The stories and memories that were shared during these gatherings revealed the full extent of Alfred's influence and the countless ways in which his wisdom, humor, and steadfast loyalty had shaped not only Bruce Wayne's development as Batman, but also the growth and maturation of every member of the extended Bat family. The decision to continue Batman's mission following Alfred's death required careful consideration of how operations and procedures would need to be modified to account for his absence, while also honoring his memory through renewed commitment to the values and principles that he had consistently championed throughout his years of service. The challenge of maintaining effectiveness while processing grief created ongoing tensions between emotional needs and operational requirements that had no easy or perfect solutions. The eventual resurrection of Alfred, through various comic book conventions and continuity adjustments, could not undo the psychological and emotional impact of his death on the characters who had experienced his loss, nor could it erase the lessons about vulnerability and mortality that his temporary absence had taught about the costs and consequences of heroic dedication. The knowledge that even the most essential and beloved figures could be taken away without warning served as permanent reminder of the fragility of the relationships and support systems that made Batman's mission both possible and meaningful. The lasting legacy of Alfred's death in the broader narrative of Batman's adventures lay not in the specific circumstances of the tragedy or the immediate consequences that followed, but in its demonstration of how personal loss could serve as both devastating setback and powerful motivation for renewed commitment to protecting others from similar fates. The experience of failing to protect someone who had dedicated his life to supporting Batman's mission created new understanding of the responsibilities that came with accepting others' loyalty and sacrifice in service of shared ideals. In the end, the mystery surrounding Alfred's death was not a question of evidence or investigation, but rather an inquiry into the nature of guilt, responsibility, and the limits of human ability to protect those we love from the consequences of our choices and commitments. The case that could never be solved was not one involving criminal identity or motive, but rather the eternal question of whether different decisions might have led to different outcomes, and whether the pursuit of justice could ever justify the risks imposed upon those whose only crime was caring enough to help in that pursuit. In the shadowed archives of Bruce Wayne's transformation from privileged orphan to the Dark Knight who would become Gotham's greatest protector, there exists a chasm of mystery so profound and deliberately obscured that it has become one of the most tantalizing enigmas in the entire Batman mythology. These are the lost years, that crucial period between young Bruce's departure from Gotham following his parents' murder and his eventual return as a fully formed vigilante, capable of striking fear into the hearts of criminals throughout the city. The deliberate gaps and contradictions in the historical record of this formative period have created a void that countless storytellers have attempted to fill, Yet none have succeeded in providing a complete and definitive account of how a traumatized child became the world's most formidable detective and crime fighter. The traditional timeline suggests that Bruce Wayne spent somewhere between 10 and 15 years abroad, though the exact duration remains deliberately ambiguous across different interpretations of his origin story. This uncertainty is not accidental, but rather reflects the mythological nature of Batman's creation, allowing different creative teams to explore various possibilities while maintaining the essential mystery that makes his transformation seem almost supernatural in its scope and effectiveness. The young man who left Gotham was driven by grief and anger, but lacked the skills, knowledge, and psychological framework necessary to wage effective war against the criminal forces that had destroyed his family. The figure who eventually returned possessed capabilities that seemed to exceed normal human limitations, combining physical prowess with intellectual acuity, technological sophistication with intuitive understanding of criminal psychology, and strategic brilliance with an almost supernatural ability to inspire both fear in enemies and hope in innocent victims. The transformation was so complete and so impressive that it raises fundamental questions about what kind of training and experiences could have produced such comprehensive development in a relatively short period of time. The earliest attempts to chronicle Bruce's training years focused primarily on physical conditioning and martial arts instruction, drawing upon popular fascination with Eastern philosophy and combat techniques that had captured Western imagination through films and literature of the 1970s and 80s. These accounts typically portrayed Bruce as a wandering student seeking out legendary masters who could teach him the fighting skills necessary to overcome opponents who possessed superior numbers and firepower. The appeal of this narrative lay in its combination of exotic locations, mysterious mentors, and the romantic notion of ancient wisdom being passed down through generations of dedicated practitioners. Dennis O'Neill's seminal work, The Man Who Falls, provided one of the most influential early interpretations of Bruce's training period, depicting his journey across multiple continents as he sought instruction from various experts in disciplines ranging from martial arts to detective work, from wilderness survival to escape artistry. This approach emphasized the comprehensive nature of his education, while also highlighting the diversity of skills that would eventually contribute to his effectiveness as Batman. The story suggested that Bruce had not simply learned to fight, but had instead absorbed knowledge and techniques from dozens of different traditions and cultures. The various masters who appeared in O'Neill's account and similar stories were typically portrayed as enigmatic figures who possessed profound expertise in specific areas, while also serving as sources of wisdom and philosophical guidance that helped shape Bruce's understanding of justice and his role as protector of innocent life. These mentors were often depicted as reluctant teachers who recognized the young man's potential, while also being concerned about his psychological state and his motivations for seeking such dangerous and demanding training. The progression from student to master that these stories depicted was never portrayed as smooth or inevitable, but rather as a series of challenges and setbacks that tested not only Bruce's physical capabilities but also his mental resilience and moral character. The various trials and ordeals that he was required to complete served multiple narrative purposes, demonstrating his worthiness to receive advanced instruction while also providing opportunities for character development and psychological growth that would be essential for his eventual effectiveness as Batman. Frank Miller's influential Batman Year One took a different approach to the training years by largely skipping over them entirely, focusing instead on Bruce's early attempts to implement his vigilante activities upon returning to Gotham and the various mistakes and learning experiences that characterized his initial efforts at crime fighting. This narrative choice emphasized the trial and error nature of becoming Batman, while also suggesting that formal training however extensive, could never fully prepare someone for the unique challenges of operating as a masked vigilante in an urban environment. The gaps left by Miller's approach created opportunities for other writers to explore different aspects of Bruce's preparation, leading to a proliferation of stories that filled in various pieces of the puzzle, while also creating new mysteries and contradictions that prevented any single interpretation from achieving definitive status. The result was a fragmented narrative that contained elements of truth while also preserving the essential mystery that made Bruce's transformation seem both believable and extraordinary. Grant Morrison's contributions to the Batman mythology included hints about more esoteric and unconventional aspects of Bruce's training, suggesting that his education had included instruction in subjects like stage magic, escape artistry, and psychological manipulation that would prove essential for creating and maintaining the Batman persona. The idea that Bruce had studied with figures like Zatara the Magician added supernatural dimensions to his skill set, while also explaining his uncanny ability to appear and disappear in ways that seemed to violate normal physical limitations. The inclusion of magical and mystical elements in Bruce's training created tensions with more realistic interpretations of the character, while also opening up narrative possibilities that allowed Batman to operate effectively in stories that involved supernatural threats and cosmic-level conflicts. The suggestion that he possessed at least rudimentary knowledge of genuine magic and occult practices provided explanations for his effectiveness against enemies who employed such techniques, while also maintaining the essentially human nature of his capabilities. The question of Bruce's financial resources during his training years raised practical considerations that most stories preferred to avoid addressing directly. Though the Wayne family's vast wealth presumably provided him with access to the best instructors and most exclusive training opportunities available anywhere in the world, the ability to travel freely, to spend extended periods studying with individual masters, and to acquire specialized equipment and resources would have been essential for achieving the level of comprehensive education that his eventual capabilities suggested he had received. The psychological dimensions of Bruce's training were often less thoroughly explored than the physical and technical aspects, yet they were arguably even more important for understanding how a traumatized young man had developed the mental resilience and emotional control necessary to function effectively as Batman. The process of channeling grief and anger into disciplined purpose, of maintaining sanity while immersing himself in the study of criminal behavior and violent conflict resolution, of preserving his humanity while preparing to wage war against the worst aspects of human nature, would have required forms of psychological training and support that were rarely depicted in detail. The various accounts of Bruce's training that emerged over the decades often contradicted each other in significant ways, creating timeline problems and logical inconsistencies that prevented fans from constructing a coherent chronological sequence of events. Some stories placed him in Tibet studying with martial arts masters, while others had him in Europe learning detective techniques from renowned investigators. Still, others suggested that he had spent time in South America mastering wilderness, survival skills, or in Japan, absorbing the principles of ninjutsu and stealth techniques. The deliberate maintenance of these contradictions served important narrative functions by preserving the mythological aspects of Batman's origin, while also allowing different creative teams to emphasize the elements that were most relevant to their particular stories and interpretations. The fragmented nature of the training accounts meant that Batman could possess whatever skills were necessary for specific adventures, while maintaining the mystery about how and where he had acquired such diverse capabilities. The influence of various film and television adaptations on the training mythology created additional layers of complexity, as elements from different media were incorporated into comic book continuity or inspired new interpretations of Bruce's formative years. Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins introduced the concept of Bruce's training with the League of Shadows under Ra's al Ghul, an idea that was subsequently adapted and modified in various comic book stories that explored similar themes while avoiding direct copying of the film's specific details. The League of Shadows concept provided a compelling explanation for both the comprehensiveness of Bruce's training and the moral complexities that would characterize his eventual methods as Batman, suggesting that he had learned his most effective techniques from an organization whose goals he ultimately could not support. The idea that his training had come from villainous sources added psychological depth to his character, while also creating ongoing tensions between the effectiveness of his methods and the ethical implications of their origins. The various secret societies and clandestine organizations that different stories suggested Bruce had encountered during his training years reflected broader themes about hidden knowledge and the prices that must be paid to acquire power, sufficient to challenge established criminal hierarchies. The notion that conventional training and education were insufficient for creating someone capable of fighting supernatural or cosmic-level threats led to explorations of more exotic and dangerous sources of instruction. The theological and philosophical dimensions of Bruce's education were often hinted at but rarely explored in depth, though his later effectiveness in dealing with mystical threats and his understanding of various religious and cultural traditions suggested that his training had included exposure to diverse belief systems and spiritual practices. The question of how someone could acquire such comprehensive knowledge while maintaining psychological stability and moral clarity remained largely unanswered, adding to the mythological aspects of his character. The role of technology in Bruce's training raised questions about when and how he had acquired the engineering and scientific knowledge that would later enable him to create and maintain the sophisticated equipment that made Batman's mission possible. The Wayne Foundation's resources could have provided access to the finest educational institutions and research facilities, yet the practical application of such knowledge in crime-fighting contexts suggested more hands-on experience than traditional academic study could have provided. The military and intelligence connections that some stories suggested Bruce had developed during his training years provided explanations for his access to classified information and specialized equipment, while also raising questions about his relationships with government agencies and law enforcement organizations. The idea that he had worked with or been trained by intelligence operatives added dimensions of international intrigue to his background, while also creating potential conflicts with his later activities as an independent vigilante. The lasting psychological impact of the training years on Bruce's personality and worldview was rarely examined in detail, though the isolation and intensity of his education must have profoundly shaped his understanding of human nature and his capacity for forming normal relationships. The years spent in constant preparation for a mission that existed primarily in his own mind would have created forms of psychological pressure and social disconnection that could never be completely overcome through subsequent experiences. The question of whether Bruce's training had been completed according to some predetermined plan or had simply continued until he felt ready to return to Gotham remained deliberately ambiguous, preserving uncertainty about his decision-making process while also maintaining the mythological aspects of his transformation. The various accounts suggested different triggers for his eventual return, from specific deadlines to particular achievements to psychological breakthroughs that convinced him he was prepared for his mission. The ongoing influence of his training experiences on Batman's methods and philosophy created continuities that connected his past education to his present activities. Yet these connections were rarely made explicit enough to provide definitive answers about specific techniques or approaches. The deliberate preservation of mystery around these formative years ensured that Batman's capabilities could continue to evolve and expand as storytelling needs required, while maintaining the essential character of someone whose preparation had been both comprehensive and fundamentally unknowable. In the end, the lost years of Bruce Wayne's training represent more than simply missing historical information or gaps in biographical detail, but rather the deliberate preservation of mystery that allows Batman to transcend normal human limitations while remaining essentially human in his motivations and vulnerabilities. The unknown aspects of his education provide the mythological foundation that makes his extraordinary capabilities believable, while also ensuring that the sources of his strength remain as mysterious and inspiring as the mission they were designed to serve. In the maddening labyrinth of psychological warfare that defines the eternal conflict between Batman and the Joker, there exists one question, so tantalizing and so fundamentally unanswerable, that it has driven fans, writers, and perhaps even the Dark Knight himself to the brink of obsession. This is not a mystery that can be solved through forensic analysis or detective work, not a puzzle that yields to logical deduction or careful observation, but rather a deliberate ambiguity that strikes at the very heart of what makes their relationship so compelling and terrifying. Does the Joker know that Batman is Bruce Wayne? The question seems deceptively simple, yet its implications ripple through every aspect of their shared history, touching upon themes of identity, obsession, and the thin line between love and hatred that characterizes the most profound human relationships. The genius of this particular mystery lies not in its complexity, but in its elegant simplicity, the way it transforms every interaction between these two titans into a potential revelation or deliberate concealment. Every word the Joker speaks to Batman carries the possibility of hidden knowledge. Every gesture might be a subtle acknowledgement of truths that remain officially unspoken. Every silence could represent either ignorance or the most sophisticated form of psychological manipulation. The uncertainty creates a state of perpetual tension that elevates their conflicts far above simple crime-fighting scenarios to become explorations of consciousness, identity, and the fundamental nature of human connection. The earliest hints of the Joker's possible knowledge emerged gradually through decades of stories that seemed to suggest an understanding that went beyond what any ordinary criminal should possess about Batman's methods, psychology, and personal vulnerabilities. His uncanny ability to anticipate Batman's responses, to exploit weaknesses that seemed too specific and too personal to have been discovered through casual observation, indicated either remarkable analytical skills or access to information that should have been closely guarded secrets known only to Batman's most trusted allies and confidants. The breakthrough story that transformed this subtle possibility into explicit narrative tension was Batman Going Sane, a tale that explored what might happen if the Joker believed he had finally succeeded in killing his greatest enemy. The psychological transformation that followed was both profound and deeply revealing, as the Clown Prince of Crime abandoned his criminal persona entirely and attempted to construct a normal life under an assumed identity, complete with conventional relationships and mundane responsibilities that seemed utterly alien to his established character. The implications of this transformation were staggering in their psychological sophistication, suggesting that the Joker's entire identity was not merely dependent upon Batman's existence, but was actually a kind of performance designed specifically for his nemesis's benefit, without Batman to serve as audience and opponent. The Joker seemed to lose not only his motivation for criminal activity, but his very sense of self, becoming a different person entirely rather than simply a criminal without a target. The story suggested that their relationship was not merely adversarial but symbiotic, with each figure's identity being fundamentally shaped by and dependent upon the other's continued existence. The return of Batman and the Joker's instant reversion to his criminal persona provided additional evidence of this psychological dependency, while also raising disturbing questions about the nature of his apparent normalcy during Batman's absence. Had the personality he displayed during his period of sanity been genuine? Or had it been another elaborate performance designed to demonstrate his versatility and psychological sophistication? The story deliberately left these questions unanswered, preserving the mystery while deepening the psychological complexity of their relationship. Death of the family marked a significant escalation in the exploration of the Joker's possible knowledge, presenting him as someone who understood not only Batman's methods and psychology, but also the identities and relationships of his entire extended family of allies and protégés. The systematic way in which he targeted each member of the Bat family, demonstrating intimate knowledge of their personal lives and individual vulnerabilities, suggested access to information that could only have come from extensive surveillance or inside knowledge of their secret identities. Yet, even as he demonstrated this comprehensive understanding of Batman's world, the Joker maintained his characteristic refusal to explicitly acknowledge Bruce Wayne's civilian identity, never once addressing his nemesis by his legal name or making direct reference to his wealth, social position, or philanthropic activities. This selective blindness created a fascinating paradox in which he appeared to know everything while officially acknowledging nothing, maintaining plausible deniability about the extent of his knowledge, while using that knowledge with devastating effectiveness. The psychological profile that emerged from these interactions suggested a mind capable of compartmentalization so sophisticated that it bordered on multiple personality disorder, able to simultaneously hold contradictory beliefs and perceptions while maintaining functional effectiveness in pursuing complex, long-term goals. The Joker seemed to exist in a state where he could know something and not know it at the same time, where information could be used without being consciously acknowledged, where truth and fiction blended so seamlessly that even he might not be certain about the boundaries between knowledge and speculation. Scott Snyder's Endgame storyline pushed these themes to their logical extreme by presenting a Joker who claimed to have been present in Gotham far longer than anyone had previously suspected, possessing historical knowledge and cultural references that suggested either impossible longevity or access to information that transcended normal human limitations. His apparent familiarity with events and individuals from decades or even centuries past created new categories of mystery about his true nature, while also providing additional evidence of his uncanny understanding of Batman's psychology and methods. The way the Joker spoke about Batman during these encounters carried implications of intimate familiarity that went beyond what could be explained through their documented confrontations, suggesting either hidden meetings and conversations that had never been officially recorded, or forms of psychological connection that operated below the level of conscious awareness. His ability to predict Batman's responses and manipulate his emotional state indicated understanding that seemed to require personal knowledge of Bruce Wayne's history and character rather than simple observation of Batman's public persona. Writer interpretations of the Joker's knowledge have varied significantly over the decades, with some creators explicitly stating their belief that he knows Batman's secret identity, while others have argued just as strongly that his effectiveness depends upon his genuine ignorance of Bruce Wayne's existence. Scott Snyder himself has suggested that the Joker could easily discover Batman's civilian identity if he chose to do so, but that he deliberately avoids such knowledge because it would interfere with the purity of his obsession with the masked vigilante rather than the man beneath the costume. This interpretation provides elegant explanation for the Joker's selective awareness, suggesting that his apparent ignorance is actually a form of willful blindness designed to preserve the psychological dynamics that make their relationship meaningful to him. Bruce Wayne, in this reading, is not merely irrelevant to the Joker, but actually threatening to his worldview, representing mundane reality and conventional human identity that would diminish the mythic dimensions of his conflict with Batman. The philosophical implications of this selective perception touch upon fundamental questions about identity and the relationship between public and private selves that extend far beyond the immediate context of superhero storytelling. The idea that someone could be simultaneously intimately familiar with and completely ignorant of different aspects of the same individual suggests forms of psychological compartmentalization that challenge normal understanding of consciousness and self-awareness. The game theory aspects of the Joker's possible knowledge create additional layers of complexity that transform every interaction between him and Batman into a potential chess match involving information, deception, and strategic revelation. If the Joker knows Batman's identity but chooses not to reveal or acknowledge this knowledge, then every conversation becomes a careful dance around topics that both participants understand but cannot openly discuss. If he genuinely does not know but suspects, then his behavior might be designed to elicit confirmation or denial through Batman's reactions and responses. The most disturbing possibility is that the Joker's knowledge exists in a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously real and unreal, depending upon the narrative requirements of specific situations and the psychological needs of the characters involved. This interpretation suggests that the boundary between knowledge and ignorance is itself fluid and malleable, shaped by unconscious desires and defensive mechanisms that operate below the level of rational thought and deliberate decision-making. The impact of this uncertainty on Batman's own psychological state has been profound and lasting, creating forms of paranoia and self-consciousness that affect his effectiveness in dealing with the Joker, while also influencing his relationships with other enemies and allies. The possibility that his secret identity might be known but unacknowledged creates pressures and anxieties that no amount of preparation or security measures can adequately address, forcing him to operate under the assumption that his most dangerous enemy might possess information that could destroy everything he has worked to protect. The strategic implications of the Joker's possible knowledge extend beyond personal relationships to encompass questions about the security of Batman's entire operation and the safety of everyone connected to his mission. If the Joker knows but chooses not to act upon his knowledge, what factors influence this restraint, and how reliable are they as protection against future revelations? If he does not know but could easily discover the truth, what prevents such discovery, and how long can such ignorance be maintained in an age of digital surveillance and information networks? The asymmetrical nature of their relationship in terms of secret identity creates additional psychological pressures for Batman, who must constantly protect information while also trying to understand an opponent whose own identity and motivations remain fundamentally mysterious. The Joker's apparent indifference to conventional concepts of privacy and personal boundaries makes him immune to many of the investigative techniques that Batman employs against other enemies, while his psychological instability makes prediction and strategic planning extraordinarily difficult. The various theories that fans and writers have proposed to explain the Joker's behavior range from simple ignorance to sophisticated psychological manipulation to supernatural or cosmic awareness that transcends normal human limitations. Each interpretation carries different implications for understanding their relationship and predicting future developments in their ongoing conflict, yet none can be definitively proven or disproven given the deliberately ambiguous nature of the available evidence. The literary and mythological dimensions of their relationship have been enriched rather than diminished by the preservation of this mystery, allowing their conflicts to operate simultaneously on multiple levels of meaning and interpretation. The uncertainty about what each character knows about the other creates space for readers to project their own understanding and anxieties onto the relationship, while also ensuring that no single interpretation can claim exclusive authority over the narrative's meaning. The ongoing nature of comic book publication ensures that this mystery will likely never be definitively resolved, as any final answer would necessarily limit future storytelling possibilities while also disappointing readers who have become invested in alternative interpretations. The maintenance of ambiguity allows different creative teams to explore various aspects of the relationship, while preserving the essential tension that makes their conflicts compelling across decades of publication and multiple media adaptations. The psychological realism of the Joker's selective awareness reflects genuine aspects of human behavior and mental processes that operate in everyday life, where people regularly demonstrate the ability to know and not know things simultaneously, depending upon their emotional needs and defensive requirements. The sophistication of his apparent compartmentalization makes him a more complex and interesting character, while also providing insights into the ways that obsession and mental illness can create alternative forms of consciousness and perception. The ultimate significance of the question lies not in any potential answer, but in its demonstration of how mystery and uncertainty can enhance, rather than diminish, character relationships and narrative tension. The Joker's possible knowledge of Batman's identity has become one of the most enduring and fascinating aspects of their shared mythology, proof that some questions are more powerful when left unanswered than when resolved through definitive revelation. In the end, the mystery of what the Joker knows about Batman's true identity serves as a perfect metaphor for the broader unknowability that characterizes their entire relationship, reminding us that the most profound human connections often exist in spaces between certainty and doubt, between knowledge and ignorance, between love and hatred. The question itself has become more important than any answer could ever be, a testament to the enduring power of mystery to illuminate truth through the very act of remaining forever hidden in shadow. In the shadow-haunted chronicles of Gotham City's unsolved mysteries, beyond the grand conspiracies and cosmic-level threats that have tested Batman's greatest capabilities, there exist smaller enigmas that nonetheless cast long shadows across the landscape of unanswered questions that define the Dark Knight's world. These are the forgotten cases and abandoned storylines, the mysterious figures who appeared briefly before vanishing into narrative limbo, the threads that were pulled taut with promise, only to be severed by editorial decisions or creative departures that left their potential forever unrealized. Among these lesser mysteries, none exemplifies the haunting power of the unfinished tale quite like the story of Onomatopoeia, the sound effect speaking killer, whose interrupted narrative became one of modern Gotham's most intriguing loose ends. The emergence of onomatopoeia in the world of costumed vigilantes represented something genuinely unprecedented in the annals of criminal behavior, a figure whose defining characteristic was simultaneously his most unsettling and his most inexplicably compelling feature. Here was a killer who communicated not through conventional speech, but through vocal reproduction of the sounds associated with violence and death, transforming the comic book medium's traditional reliance on written sound effects into a terrifyingly literal manifestation of destructive force made audible. His presence in any scene was announced not by threats or proclamations, but by the chilling reproduction of gunshots, blade impacts, and the final gasps of dying victims. Kevin Smith's introduction of this unique antagonist during the Green Arrow storyline established the basic parameters of his methodology, while also creating expectations about the depth and complexity of his psychological profile that would remain largely unfulfilled due to the premature termination of his story arc. The initial portrayal suggested a mind that had either been damaged in ways that prevented normal communication, or had deliberately chosen to abandon conventional language in favor of a more primal and direct form of expression that cut through the usual barriers between thought and action. The targeting pattern that Onomatopoeia displayed during his early appearances revealed a level of strategic thinking and operational planning that seemed at odds with his apparent communication limitations, suggesting either hidden depths of intelligence or the possibility that his sound-based speech was a deliberate affectation rather than a genuine psychological or neurological condition. His preference for non-powered vigilantes as victims indicated careful research and surveillance capabilities that enabled him to identify and track individuals whose activities had attracted minimal public attention, but whose elimination would nonetheless send clear messages to the broader community of amateur crime fighters. The migration of Onomatopoeia from Star City to Gotham City represented a significant escalation in both the scope of his activities and the level of threat he posed to established heroes. Yet, it also created opportunities for more sophisticated character development and exploration of his motivations that would ultimately be squandered by the incomplete nature of his story arc. His arrival in Batman's territory was presented as a natural evolution of his campaign against non-powered vigilantes, recognizing Gotham as a rich hunting ground where numerous amateur crime fighters operated without the protection or resources that characterized more established superhero communities. The psychological warfare that Onomatopoeia employed against his targets was perhaps more disturbing than his actual acts of violence, as his presence transformed familiar sounds into sources of terror and paranoia that could persist long after immediate danger had passed. The knowledge that footsteps in an alley, the click of a weapon being prepared, or the whisper of clothing in motion might signal his approach created forms of hypervigilance and anxiety that interfered with normal functioning, while also making his eventual attacks more effective due to the psychological damage that preceded physical confrontation. The relationship between Onomatopoeia's unique communication style and his apparent effectiveness as a predator raised fascinating questions about the nature of language and its role in human consciousness and social interaction that were barely explored before his story was abandoned. His ability to function as a sophisticated hunter and killer, despite his apparent inability or unwillingness to engage in conventional verbal communication, suggested either alternative forms of intelligence and planning capability, or the possibility that his linguistic limitations were compensated by enhanced development in other areas of cognitive function. The elaborate disguise and infiltration operation that brought Onomatopoeia into Bruce Wayne's social circle under the identity of Baphomet represented a level of strategic sophistication and long-term planning that seemed almost incompatible with his established character traits, yet also provided tantalizing hints about depths of capability and motivation that remained largely unexplored. The patience and skill required to maintain false identity, while gradually gaining the trust of someone as naturally suspicious and analytically minded as Bruce Wayne, indicated preparation and psychological stability that contradicted simpler interpretations of his character as a straightforward serial killer with unusual speech patterns. The revelation of Baphomet's true identity as Onomatopoeia accomplished through the shocking assault on Silver Street. Cloud, that served as both climax and abrupt termination of the storyline, created one of the most dramatically effective yet ultimately frustrating conclusions in modern Batman literature. The attack demonstrated both his willingness to target innocent civilians and his ability to exploit the personal relationships of his primary targets. Yet it also raised numerous questions about his motivations and methods that would never receive adequate exploration or resolution. The psychological impact on Batman of discovering that he had been deceived and manipulated by someone he had come to trust, even marginally, added personal dimensions to what might otherwise have been a straightforward predator versus protector conflict. Yet these emotional complexities were never given the development they deserved due to the premature end of the narrative. The violation of trust represented by onomatopoeia's deception struck at Batman's confidence in his own judgment, while also highlighting the vulnerability that came from maintaining any kind of civilian relationships or social connections. The fate of Silver Street. Cloud following the attack became one of the most significant unresolved elements of the interrupted storyline, as readers were left without information about whether she survived her injuries, what kind of medical treatment she received, or how her experience might have affected her relationship with Bruce Wayne and her understanding of the dangers that surrounded him. The lack of closure regarding her condition created ongoing uncertainty about the consequences of onomatopoeia's actions, while also denying readers the emotional resolution that such a dramatic plot development demanded. The broader implications of onomatopoeia's successful infiltration of Bruce Wayne's social circle extended beyond immediate personal consequences to encompass questions about the security of Batman's civilian identity and the effectiveness of the various protective measures he employed to prevent such breaches. The fact that someone with such obvious psychological abnormalities and criminal intentions could gain sufficient access to conduct extended surveillance and manipulation suggested either serious flaws in Batman's security protocols or capabilities on onomatopoeia's part that exceeded initial assessments of his threat level. The motivations driving onomatopoeia's campaign against non-powered vigilantes remained largely mysterious throughout his brief appearances, with various theories proposed, but none confirmed through definitive character development or revelation. The possibility that he was acting on behalf of larger criminal organizations seeking to eliminate amateur crime fighters who interfered with their operations was suggested but never explored, while alternative explanations involving personal trauma or ideological opposition to vigilante activity were hinted at but never substantiated through concrete evidence or character backstory. The technical aspects of how onomatopoeia reproduced various sounds with such precision and effectiveness raised questions about whether his abilities were entirely natural or involved some form of technological enhancement or training that enabled him to achieve effects that seemed to exceed normal human vocal capabilities. His apparent ability to perfectly mimic not only simple sounds like gunshots but also more complex audio patterns suggested either exceptional natural talent or access to equipment and techniques that were not apparent from casual observation of his activities. The connection between onomatopoeia's sound-based communication and his effectiveness as a hunter and killer suggested possible neurological or psychological conditions that might explain both his linguistic limitations and his enhanced abilities in other areas of function. Yet these medical and scientific aspects of his character were never explored in sufficient detail to provide satisfactory explanations for his unique combination of capabilities and limitations. The potential for using his condition as a window into alternative forms of consciousness and communication was largely wasted due to the superficial treatment his character received. The impact of onomatopoeia's activities on the broader vigilante community in Gotham and beyond was established as significant, but never fully explored, with other amateur crime fighters presumably adjusting their methods and security procedures in response to his proven ability to identify and eliminate targets who had previously considered themselves safely anonymous. The psychological effect of knowing that someone was specifically hunting non-powered vigilantes would have influenced recruitment and retention in these informal crime-fighting networks, while also affecting the willingness of ordinary citizens to take direct action against criminal activities in their communities. The investigative efforts that Batman presumably undertook to understand onomatopoeia's background, methods, and motivations were never depicted in detail, leaving readers without insight into what kind of evidence might have been available, or what conclusions might have been drawn from analysis of his crime scenes and behavioral patterns. The lack of detective work focused on this unique antagonist represented a missed opportunity to showcase Batman's analytical capabilities, while also providing character development and background information that could have enriched understanding of both the villain and the hero's response to his threat. The relationship between onomatopoeia and other members of Batman's rogues gallery was never explored, though his unique characteristics and methodologies would have made him either a valuable asset or a dangerous rival to established criminal organizations, depending upon his willingness to cooperate with others, or his insistence on operating as an independent agent. The potential for conflict or collaboration with figures like the Joker, who also employed unconventional communication styles and psychological warfare techniques, represented rich possibilities for character interaction that were never realized. The artistic and narrative potential of a character who embodied the medium's visual sound effects in literal form was recognized but never fully exploited, with onomatopoeia serving primarily as a plot device rather than a fully developed antagonist whose unique characteristics could be used to explore themes related to communication, violence, and the relationship between language and identity. The metafictional aspects of his character, which could have provided commentary on the nature of comic book storytelling and the role of visual elements in narrative construction, were touched upon but never developed into substantial thematic content. The abandonment of the onomatopoeia storyline became itself a kind of mystery that reflected broader issues in comic book publishing regarding the challenges of maintaining narrative continuity across creative team changes and editorial decisions that prioritized immediate concerns over long-term character development. The unfinished nature of his story served as a reminder of how publication schedules and commercial considerations could interfere with artistic vision and reader satisfaction, creating frustrations that extended far beyond the immediate narrative to encompass questions about the medium's ability to deliver satisfying conclusions to complex storylines. The legacy of onomatopoeia as an unresolved mystery in Batman's world continues to influence fan speculation and discussion, with his brief but memorable appearances generating ongoing interest in what might have been revealed about his character and motivations if his story had been allowed to reach completion. The fragments of narrative that remain serve as tantalizing hints about a potentially fascinating antagonist whose full potential was never realized, creating a sense of loss that extends beyond simple disappointment to encompass genuine mourning for stories that will never be told and mysteries that will never find resolution. The broader category of abandoned storylines and forgotten mysteries that onomatopoeia represents has become an increasingly significant aspect of comic book culture, as the medium's reliance on ongoing publication and continuous character development creates numerous opportunities for narrative threads to be dropped or forgotten due to changes in creative direction or commercial priorities. These incomplete stories serve important functions in maintaining the sense of mystery and unpredictability that characterizes the best examples of the medium, while also creating frustrations that reflect the inherent tensions between artistic vision and commercial necessity. The enduring fascination with unresolved mysteries like the true nature and ultimate fate of onomatopoeia demonstrates the power of questions to capture imagination and sustain interest even when answers are not forthcoming, suggesting that some aspects of storytelling are more effective when they remain incomplete than when they are brought to definitive conclusions. The mystery itself becomes a kind of story that readers can continue to explore and develop through speculation and analysis long after the original narrative has ended or been abandoned. In the end, perhaps the greatest mystery is not any single unsolved case or hidden identity, but rather why Gotham City continues to produce such darkness generation after generation, cycle after cycle. These mysteries we have explored tonight are symptoms of something deeper, threads in a tapestry woven from shadow and obsession, hope and despair, intertwined so completely that separating them becomes impossible. The questions that haunt Batman's world are the same that haunt our own. Can we ever truly know another person's heart? Is justice possible in an imperfect world? Do our origins define our destiny, or can we transcend the circumstances of our birth? In seeking answers to Gotham's mysteries, we confront the fundamental enigma of human nature itself. And so the Dark Knight continues his eternal vigil, knowing that some cases will never close, some questions will never find answers, some shadows will never yield to light. Yet he persists, because in the searching itself lies meaning, in the attempt to understand lies hope, and in the refusal to surrender to mystery lies the very essence of what makes us human. Rest now, guardian of mysteries, and let the unanswered questions of Gotham fade into the peaceful darkness of sleep, where all enigmas dissolve into dreams and all searches end in rest.